Good afternoon, everybody. If I could ask members of council to please take their seats as I call to order the Planning and Development Committee meeting for June the 19th already. Members of committee, there are some changes to the agenda. I'll go through them with you. They should be before at everybody's desk. The first change is that there is a delegation 5.2 from Suzanne McDonald, a planner wishing to speak on the Brampton MCR review report 713, 10.2 and 13.1. The next change to the agenda, 713 has five reports that it's in reference to. It's the MCR, see items 5.2, 10.2, 13.1, 13.2, and 13.3. I'll be looking for someone to add onto the agenda today under other business the Volvo application that was referred from a previous meeting until there was an opportunity for staff to meet with members of council to discuss that. Councillor Gibson, you'll move that be added to the agenda. And the second item to be added is a motion, and that I'll be looking for a mover at the time. It's a discussion and motion on the August 9th council meeting that is tentative, that the clerk's office and planning are looking to be confirmed. There are items of correspondence, again under item 10.2, the MCR, at the bottom, your original agenda says that it says see item 713. It's also it's 713 plus 13.2. And there are three items of correspondence. 13.1, Jonathan Roger from Ymca Priamo Limited. 13.2 from Scott Snyder, Turkstra Matza. And item 13.3, Paul Lowe's SGL Planning. All of these are on the MCR report. I don't believe there's any other changes to the agenda. I see no speakers on the board. Someone like to move approval? Councillor Bowman, all those in favor? That's carried. If I could remind everybody around the council table and in the audience today, if you could put your cellular devices on an inaudible mode so that the meeting is not interrupted. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. There is the consent agenda. Does anybody wish to add or remove an item from consent? Seeing none, would someone like to move consent? Councillor Dillon, all those in favor? That's carried. There's no statutory public meeting reports today. The first delegation, and perhaps I should have asked this at the beginning, is there anybody here on item 7.2? It is a proposed housekeeping updates to sign bylaw 399-2002 as amended, all wards. Is anybody here for that public meeting? Seeing none, would someone like to put item 7.2 into consent as well? Councillor Willens, all in favor? That's carried. Our next delegation is Suzanne McDonald, a planner, SGL Planning and Design Incorporated. Suzanne, if you'd like to come forward. Oh, wow, you're on deck.
Where do I go?
That was just a terrific grand entrance there.
Okay.
So Suzanne, we've added you to the agenda, and we understand that you're here to speak on item 713.
Yes, that's correct.
MCR. We can give you a couple minutes to catch your breath there.
I'm just going to grab my notes. Thank you. So, as you mentioned, I'm Suzanne McDonald. I'm from SGL Planning and Design, and we represent the owners of Macmore Limited.
Suzanne, can I ask you to stop for a second? Is
Yes.
your microphone on there? It's very difficult to hear you.
Yeah, there's a red light. Yeah.
Okay, that's better.
Thank you. We represent the owners of 75 Bramley Road, which is the property directly to the north of 69 Bramley. And in general, we're supportive of the conversion of 69 Bramley. And as well as staff's recommendation to look at 75 Bramley further to ensure that there's a logical boundary of the employment lands. And we are concerned with the 69 Bramley being converted in advance of 75 Bramley. This will mean that 75 Bramley will be surrounded on three sides by residential and maintain and still be designated as employment. And we are particularly concerned with the timing of this, given that with the new growth plan policy that will come into effect on July 1st, we're concerned that the MCR process won't be able to continue as is, that the MCR process will then have to be taken over by the region, and the opportunity to look at 75 Bramley further won't be possible. And that is why we're urging that committee convert to 75 Bramley now, as opposed to waiting to ensure a logical boundary for of the lands.
Okay. Are there any questions of the delegation? Seeing none, would someone like to move receipt of the delegation? Councillor Fortini? All those in favor? That's carried. Members of committee, did you wish to bring forward 7.13 or wait until we get to that? Defer to the two area councillors, sorry. You want to bring, you'll wait? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move now down to the staff presentations, and we'll bring forward item 7.1 for the Parks and Rec Master Plan, and we'll welcome John Spencer to do the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to members of council. I'd like to also extend a special welcome. We've got a couple of members of our citizen panel who worked with us throughout. So, gentlemen, would you please acknowledge? The citizen panel is a group that we formed to provide us with some insight and sort of hands-on feedback throughout the process. So thanks, gentlemen, for showing up today. We also have a few members of our steering committee with us today, and so thank you to them. We couldn't get this project done without their assistance. And I think we've got some members of the public that are here specifically for this item as well. So I just want to acknowledge all those folks. Todd Brown is going to take us through a presentation in a moment. Todd's with Monty Brown Planning Consultants, and they were our lead consultant on this project. And but before we get into these slides, I just thought I'd give you a bit of a staff perspective on this project, give you a little bit of the lay of the land from our perspective. So when we started this project, it was about 18 months ago, formally. Informally, it was prior to that. And we knew we were about to embark on something that was going to be quite instrumental in terms of shaping the future of the city in the way of parks and recreation facilities. We knew that Brampton's got a legacy of having a strong parks and recreation system. Long-time Bramptonians talk about the pride that they have for their local recreation center, or perhaps how the local sports club influenced the upbringing of their children. So we know that parks and recreation and the programs that are provided in our parks and recreation buildings are very integral to people's lives. But over the years, the corporation's approach to service provision has evolved a little bit to keep pace with the rapid growth that we've experienced in the last 20 years or so. So the smaller recreation center has transitioned to the larger multiplex. Some of our or neighborhood parks that were very sports oriented, they've been transitioned into smaller, more passive parks. And of course, the soccer and the ball, the cricket players, all the active sports enthusiasts have been shifted out to more of the community parks where there's a little bit of room for their operation. All of these things have been done really to sort of respond to providing more operational efficiencies. We know that in some cases, these aren't always well received or widely embraced, but they've been done for that purpose. Growth continues, of course, in Brampton, and we're continuing to get new pressures brought upon us. But they're all coming from the part where people want to make their community more livable. So they're legitimate and need to be considered. So things like splash pads, shade structures, we get a lot of those requests, as you all know, and that's to sort of make the increasingly hot summers more tolerable. We've got demands for things that perhaps 15 years ago weren't even demanded. So things like cricket fields, outdoor fitness equipment. So we're trying to respond to those things as well. We also hear from newer communities, and they're sort of looking back at the older communities and saying, well, we want an equivalent. We want something that, from a supply and a quality perspective, that's at least like those old communities. And we also get demands that our older parks and our older recreation centers, that they be updated, that they be made equivalent to the new facilities. So we've got pressures coming from all parts of the city. And we knew that in the absence of a plan, a strategic plan, or the detailed implementation strategies that flow from that we had a gap in our decision-making model. And that left us prone to potentially making uninformed decisions. So with council's consent, in early 2016, we went out and hired the consortium, and this included Monteith Brown. It also included Tucker Reed and Associates and a facilitation company called Swearhunt Facilitation. We established an interdepartmental team, one with really representation from across the organization, and we wanted to provide a framework for how we could improve the delivery of parks and recreation services in the city. From the very start, we emphasized that the delivery of the plan was going to require a consultation effort. And I think through the updates that we provided you over the last year and a half, you've seen that effort. But we've got an enormous city, and physically enormous. It's multicultural, multilingual, multi-aged, and we knew that in order to have a successful plan, we're going to have to try to reach out to all of those facets of our community. We also recognize that we don't deliver programs and services on our own. We've got many thousands of volunteers out in the community that are organizing sports clubs, recreation associations, really of all shape and size. And we had to ensure that we consulted with them in the process. What we heard from them is that having dialogue with them, not only on large, strategic planning documents like this, but also on the detailed implementation, design, and construction of new facilities, they have to be part of the equation. So you're going to see in the plan that that's another area of emphasis for us. We also felt that when we go out and talk with these associations and individuals, there's an opportunity to sort of leverage them for partnerships. So that can be not only from a programming perspective, but also from a financial perspective. So the emphasis on engagement is something that Todd's going to speak of, so I won't go into it in detail. But you're going to see in the document that the feedback we received was invaluable. I also want to thank each one of you. All of you provided your time, both attending events, meeting with our consultant team, and that feedback was very, very helpful to us. I personally think that, I've been here about 14 years, I think that this effort and this outreach that we put out for this project is as significant as any strategic planning exercise that we've engaged in the last 15 years or so. A further point of emphasis in this plan, and really from the get-go, was the promotion of health and well-being for all residents of Brampton. We know that Brampton continues to be a place where people are calling home. And according to the statistics that I've received, 38 people are moving to Brampton each day. But we also know that 1 in 10 Region of Peel residents have diabetes, and that statistic is expected to grow to 6 in 10 by 2025. I think I can speak for all of us that we don't think that's an acceptable outcome for our residents. And Brampton can play a part in turning that statistic around. So the recommendations that you're going to find in this plan are fundamental to improving the wellness of all Bramptonians. We also know, though, that the master plan and implementing the recommendations we've got won't do it alone. We've got a number of other documents that the city is working on right now that are going to play a part in that. The active transportation master plan, I see the Langs over here. The implementation of that plan is going to be something that is going to improve the well-being of our citizens. We apply sustainability metrics, of course, to new plans of subdivision, so that's important. And of course, we got the environmental master plan that we're continuing to work on implementation. Now, we call this document a master plan, and I think that implies, for some anyway, that we got all the answers tied up in this one document. And of course, that's not the case. It's really just the starting point. We're viewing this plan as sort of a framework for decision-making going forward. It'll help us evolve what we're building, our programming and the like. You've already seen in recent weeks reports that are coming forward that sort of build off what we learned through the plan process. We think that we can use this as a guide, but it has to be viewed as a flexible guide as well. It has to be adaptive to new information that comes in, new opportunities, new ideas. And so from that perspective, we don't view the plan as being restrictive, but rather prescriptive. So I think that's an important thing to emphasize. We also know that, and we want to remind you, of course, that through annual budget deliberations, we're going to have an opportunity to revisit ideas. We've got various projects in the hopper already that we're going to be bringing forth reports to you in the fall and next year that are going to drive things like rec center renewals, new approaches to program delivery, user fees, and the like. So from that perspective, this document needs to be viewed as a living document. What you're going to hear from Todd today is really a highlight of the recommendations that we've got in the document. I often say that undertaking a plan like this, the product, is almost secondary to the process that got us there, because in the process of doing the project, we sort of renewed acquaintances with partners out in the, for example, the school boards. We've sort of gotten to know what each other do. We've dealt with a reorganization that's kind of repositioned people within the organization. So this plan has helped us to try to figure out who's going to do what. We've also, as I mentioned, initiated things already. We've got the Brampton Recreation Center's review that's underway. We've already drafted edits for the official plan, Parkland policies, and we're starting discussions on how we're going to unfold the development of the Mississauga Embleton site out in Bram West and the next phase of Gore Meadows development. We're also making deliberate and regular updates to our portal. Something we heard from some members of council was that our portal isn't as helpful as it could be in terms of promoting what we offer and how people can go about getting access to those facilities and programs. In terms of who's going to do what, I would draw your attention to the appendix in the master plan. What we try to do is identify which department would be accountable for each recommendation, and in some cases, which section will be responsible for it. So what we're going to be seeking from you today is endorsement of this plan. We think that with that endorsement, we'll be able to strategically move forward on the recommendations, and hopefully we'll end up with an outcome that's going to meet the needs of our residents for years to come. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Todd, and he's going to take you through the formal presentation, and then following which we'd be happy to answer your questions and receive any additional comments you might have.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Todd. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. Good to see you again. So, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for allowing us the opportunity to present and work with you, but also to present the Parks and Recreation Master Plan to use for the City of Brampton for your consideration and hopeful endorsement, as John has indicated. Use this. As John's indicated, this master plan represents a significant undertaking by all involved and has culminated in a plan that represents the beliefs, what we believe to serve the City of Brampton as a guiding document for the years to come. Council initially approved the request for proposal back in October 2015, and our firm, along with our team, were selected at that point in time. The intent was really to develop a long-range plan to the year 2031 that will guide the provision of parks and open space, recreation facilities, indoor sports and recreation infrastructure, programs, and services. We also wanted to respond to the importance that Council placed on community engagement, and therefore a comprehensive community consultation program was developed and implemented over the course of the plan. Other key inputs included community demographics, trends and best practices, alignment with other city documents, and a comprehensive analysis of operational and financial sustainability. One of the important aspects of a master plan is that it's evidence-based, that you can clearly see that we have looked at a number of different elements and put that together to support the recommendations. So in addition to the community engagement and consultation program, we looked at the detailed socio-demographics of the community, both now and projected into the future. We looked at the distribution of facilities and programs and where those are currently being offered and where gaps may exist. Trends and best practices. And also, with the data that's now available, we looked very closely at the utilization of your current assets. So wanting to make sure that you're optimizing what you currently have before you consider expanding the range of opportunities that you have. In order to be a community responsive plan, the engagement process began very early, initially identifying hot button issues that were facing the city. We wanted to gain a valuable insight into the strengths and weaknesses of your Parks and Recreation system and understand the needs and priorities from the groups and public perspective, and also from staff perspective. It really started off with the citizen panel, as John had indicated, made up of representatives of other community, other committees. Thanks, John. And we also had a launch event, which I know many of you attended. That launch event was very important to get the word out, get people very interested in the project and want to be engaged throughout the study. We should say that at that launch event, we found it very important that a number of organizations in your community also provided booths to represent different aspects of Parks and Recreation that they provide, services they provide. So we did get strong community support at that event as a kickoff. In May of 2016, we held an initial public meeting, and then that was followed by a very successful surveying process where we had over 1,100 online surveys completed and 35 stakeholder surveys. In addition, we did a number of stakeholder workshops where we invited stakeholders into sessions to have a good debate and discussion on what their needs and priorities were, and also to share ideas so that they knew that they weren't the only players in town, that they were also needing to share resources. We followed that up with staff roundtable sessions and interviews with council members and with senior management. Throughout the process, we also encourage written submissions by your residents and stakeholders through your website and email address that was provided, and we did get some feedback throughout the process from that portal. As the master plan began to take shape, in the spring of this year, we began to test some of the directions of the plan. So internal briefings were held with mayor and members of council. Follow-up stakeholder workshop was held where we invited stakeholders to give us feedback on the process and on the directions. We also held 2 public open houses, one at Cassie Campbell and one at Gore Meadows, where we again encouraged people to participate and give us their feedback. The draft master plan was also posted on your website, and again, encouragement for written comments at that point as well. The master plan process was an 18-month time frame from project kickoff to background research, consultation, development of preliminary assessments, interim reporting, and implementation analysis, all of which fed into the draft master plan. We again tested the recommendations or directions and are now presenting that document to you today. Key considerations of the master plan included the significant population growth that your city is anticipated to see over the next number of years. To the year 2031, we anticipate about 200,000 additional people living in your city, so we'll reach 837,000 people with a diverse socioeconomic and cultural profile. We also recognize that you already have a robust number of parks and recreation facilities within the community and offering a variety of scale, sizes, and geographic catchment areas. Themes coming out of the community consultation program were very much aligned with a lot of the trends that we're seeing nationally and provincially and regionally as well. And I just want to identify a few of those. So an ongoing commitment to inclusivity, making sure that all people are able to participate. Multi-use, multi-generational, multi-seasonal, and multicultural. Balancing neighborhood needs with citywide needs. Creating opportunities for unstructured drop-in type of activities. Providing comfortable, safe, and welcoming environments for people to participate in, whether it's their parks or your facilities. Looking at mutually beneficial partnership opportunities that could exist, both now and also looking into the future to make sure those opportunities could be presented. Recognizing the high quality of sport facilities and recreation facilities in your community and the need to continue to provide those opportunities. And then issues with respect to funding and costs and making sure that was kept into check as well. Overall, we have 114 recommendations coming out of the master plan. Again, it's about a 15-year time frame, so it sounds like a lot of recommendations, but it's over a fairly lengthy period of time. And what we've done is when we look at indoor and outdoor facilities, program delivery, service delivery, one of the key things we did is, from a distribution point of view, created recreation planning areas. So we created 9 of those areas so that we could get a good sense of distribution of opportunities within the community. Each one of those 9 areas really represented fairly homogeneous population areas or geographic units, each having similar long-term population growth expectations and attributes, each having discernible boundaries, so a major roadway or valley lands, and also containing at least one major park or community center. The timing for implementation, we looked at short, medium, and long-term timeframes, and again, as was indicated by Mr. Spencer, we wanted to make sure this was a living document that was able to be flexible over time so that as things changed, the plan was able to adapt to that. I'm going to go through just some of the recommendations. I won't obviously go through all 114, but we wanted to highlight some of the key recommendations coming out of the plan, starting initially with indoor facilities. We're recommending the community center at Mississauga and Hamilton Community Park. That facility would ideally contain an indoor aquatic center, a gymnasium, a fitness center, and youth space, along with program rooms. In the long term, it should, in the design phase, it should ideally design in twin pad arena, although we don't think that arena is needed in the short term. Long term, just having it designed so that if you do need it, it makes logical sense. Also, because it's a large community park, we think that there's opportunity to look at a skateboard park at that site, and also site permitting either club quality tennis courts or a full basketball court opportunity there. We've also recommended an East End Senior Center with some traditional components being a gymnasium, fitness space, and program rooms, but ideally designed in a hub sort of mentality or a hub type design so that it could include partners. Partners could be newcomer services, could be health services, could be many other services. But we think a hub type model makes a lot of sense as opposed to duplicating a similar senior center that you already have in the West End. For your older or smaller facilities, again, the master plan supports Council's recent approval to undertake a formal review of the Bramalea family of facilities, including the Howden Recreation Complex and the Victoria Park Arena, to rationalize expenditures and facility renewal and replacement. The plan also recommends as a pilot project retrofitting 2 of your smaller pool locations to respond to the demand for more therapeutic and rehabilitative services while also recognizing the aging of the population. Relocating also an aging single pad arena or arenas to minimize renewal and ongoing operating costs towards a multi-purpose or a multi-pad facility, and also considering rebalancing distribution so that you have more arena opportunities across your municipality. And creating a diverse range of neighborhood-based services by repurposing an aging, underutilized pool for dry floor purposes to encourage opportunities for sport, fitness, arts and culture, and many other community-based or neighborhood-based opportunities. In terms of other indoor facilities, recommending the ability to enhance your existing program capacity of your multipurpose rooms. We find in many communities, including yours, that multipurpose rooms tend to not get as highly utilized as they could be, and often it's a matter of prioritizing what improvements could be made so that they can be more multi-purpose and multifunctional and drive additional demand for them. In keeping with the trends that we're seeing in ice pad demand, not only in your community, but we're seeing province-wide and actually nationally a decline in arena utilization. So we're recommending that you target 19 ice pads to serve your community, which would result in the Victoria Park facility remaining closed. And it's very consistent with the previous slide, which talks about trying to perhaps look at removing some of your older single pad facilities and moving towards multi-pad facilities as demand warrants. Also increasing your opportunities for gymnasiums through the provision of new or renovated gym facilities, and continuing to work with the school board both on their access to their existing gyms, but also for new gyms that may be developed at new schools. In terms of outdoor facilities, we believe that there's a great opportunity for the planning, community services, and public works to work collaboratively through site selection and prioritization, planned park renewal, budget availability, and reporting back to council on the following, possibly through the annual budgeting process. The provision of one additional artificial turf facility meant to meet a broad range of outdoor sports, so soccer, lacrosse, rugby, football, and so forth. 9 rectangular sports fields designed with the Ontario Soccer Association's long-term player development model in mind. Constructing ball diamonds to address geographic gaps. Ideally, there's opportunities, we believe there's opportunities to work with school boards to help meet some of those shortfalls. And developing new cricket pitches, one at McGanless Park, one at Gore Meadows Community Park, and one at Southwest Brampton, while also making select improvements to existing pitches, which could include looking at lighting and also batting cages, which we heard through the consultation process as well. Developing public tennis courts to serve new residential areas, along with club court quality at Gore Meadows and or Mississauga Embleton community parks. And to respond to the demand for basketball opportunities at the grassroots level, providing basketball courts within 5 to 10 minutes walking distance of new residential areas and in areas currently underserviced within the city, so gap areas. In recognition of the city's strong level of basketball talent, and we are recommending that the city strive to provide a high-quality, sport-focused full court in each of the 9 recreation planning areas, which could be possibly leveraging opportunities for sponsorship with other organizations. Providing a skateboard park in both southwest and northwest Brampton, the growth areas, and also looking at strategic renewal or replacement of the aging skateboard infrastructure that you currently have, and also bolstering the opportunities for skateboarding by creating geographically some smaller skate zones, which could be as simple as providing a ramp, a curb, or a rail at various locations. In terms of outdoor aquatics, undertaking an architectural study to look at Eldorado pools and creating a fun factor there. That we think by creating more fun associated with that pool, you'll drive additional interest and participation at that location. Adding 4 new splash pads at community or citywide level parks, possibly or ideally adjacent or nearby with community centers so that there's access to washrooms, change rooms, and so forth. And also looking at converting the wading pools at Gage Park and at Balmoral Park to splash pads. For parks and open space, we've recommended creating 2 new categories, one being an urban park, which tends to be smaller, more less grass, more hard surface for the most part, or artificial turf in some cases, and linear connector within that hierarchy. Proactively acquiring parkland at 1.6 hectares per 1,000 residents, which would result in about 240 hectares of additional parkland required by the year 2031. Now, it sounds like a large number, but when we talk about 200,000 additional people coming to your community to live on top of what you currently have, That would seem to be an appropriate amount of parkland, and also to meet the needs of having a good distribution of parkland to serve your residents. We've also recommended undertaking a parkland acquisition strategy in the master plan so that it gives the city more detail on what that acquisition might be and where the opportunities might exist. Lastly, in terms of parkland acquisition, looking at utilizing the Planning Act as much as possible, but also looking at other opportunities through surplus school acquisition and working with joint use planning opportunities with schools and others as the opportunities become available. As John indicated, there's always a demand for aging infrastructure, and we did hear through the consultation process a concern that we have aging parks and demographics that are evolving around them, that maybe the parks were put in place for one demographic and now that's changed, and a matter of making sure that there is some recognition that we do need to look at renewing some of the older park assets to better serve the needs of the community that now lives around them. To promote stewardship and leverage external resources for funding park renewal, looking at expanding the opportunities associated with the Sustainable Neighborhood Retrofit Action Plan project. Short form is SNAP, and that is working with the Toronto Region and Credit Valley Conservation Authorities for those renewal opportunities. And the master plan also supports other city initiatives, so it's not done in isolation. It considers the environmental master plan, the natural heritage and environmental management strategy, and the active transportation plan. Lastly, in terms of recreation services and programs, we believe that there is a need to aim to improve the physical activity levels, frequency, duration, and intensity for the residents. Again, this is to help fight, to make people healthy, but get them fit, and to fight some common diseases that are out there that physical activity can help to prevent or at least shorten the likelihood of that happening. Recognizing the importance to health of individuals and to the community in terms of natural outdoor settings, so getting people outside and fit. Every resident should have the opportunity to learn how to swim, and every resident should also know the importance of being safe in and around water. Ensuring that Brampton's older adults and seniors are active and engaged in leisure opportunities. Placing an emphasis on all residents, including diverse and marginalized populations, to enhance the overall health and vibrancy of your community. And in sport development, ensuring that every resident should have the choice to participate in sporting opportunities for their own household. In terms of keeping the master plan relevant, we think there's a number of key things that could be done. Business planning and performance measurements of parks, facilities, and program in terms of utilization rates should continue, so looking at those utilization rates over a period of time. Monitoring emerging sports and cultural trends to position the city to respond to changes in the future needs. Conducting regular dialogue with existing and potential partners, stakeholders, and the public. Undertaking an annual review and implementation report on the implementation of the master plan itself. And communicating the achievements of the master plan through informational brochures, report cards, referencing the master plan in divisional reports to council, and so forth. Lastly, updating the master plan every 5 years to make sure that you have a good sense of changes. So the plan does recognizing changes in demographics, trends, participation, funding that may be available, and other provincial legislation that could affect demand or funding available. In closing, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan is designed to be a flexible living document that guides council and staff in decision-making on a regular and ongoing basis, while ensuring that the recommendations remain current and relevant and help shape the provision of Parks and Recreation in your community. I'd like to thank the committee for your time today, and also thank you very much for your ongoing involvement throughout this process. It very much, I think, helped make this plan stronger. We'd also be remiss if we didn't thank the community, the stakeholders, the public, and city staff for their tremendous involvement throughout the process to make sure that this is a plan that they can be proud of And I think the reaction that we've had so far is that they do feel that this plan does represent what they've told us. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Todd. I know you've been standing for a long time. We've got a number of speakers on the board. It may be a bit of a tag team between yourself and John Spencer. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So I just want to first off start off by thanking you, staff as well as stakeholders and all the residents and council as well for providing their input. I think it was a great group effort, a joint effort, and I commend everybody involved. Quick question though, certain things pop up as I was reading it, so I was just wondering if you can answer it as we go. In terms of the outreach on 6.1.4, was there ever any direct visits by staff or perhaps somebody associated to you guys to actual facilities, parks, venues, etc., to get a real idea of like a hands-on idea of what the conditions are?
Yes, so we visited many of the parks and facilities in the community at different times of the day, at different times of the week, to get a good understanding of what that utilization would be. I can't say that we stood there for hours at each location to really understand how that transition might take place, because we do know that during the daytime it might be very different than evening or weekend use of the various parks. But as much as we could, and through consultation where the residents and stakeholders would tell us how they would use the different facilities and parks, that was how we gauge things.
Yeah, because I think it's really important when we actually go out. And I know a lot of the staff, when I took them out with me to some of the parks, it was an eye-opener for them. And it kind of changed the way they deal with, the way they handle their own, processes. So I think it's really important. I think it's an ongoing process. We need to continue to go out more to the parks. There's a couple of things that I kind of had issue with. Multi-purpose sites. For example, I have a ton of requests that come in, and particularly when the summer starts for these festivals or events. Chinguzi is usually booked. Now we have to basically send them out to other cities in non-city venues. For example, Wild Water Kingdom, they're unable to get that. They had to go to Mississauga, they had to go to Toronto. They're using parking lots now because I think the demographic has changed, and some of these events that they hold have just grown exponentially. Whereas it used to be a few hundred, now there are a few thousand. So ones we've turned away are going to Sheridan College, their parking lots. They're going to Bramley Go Station. They're going to Wonderland, in the amphitheater in downtown Toronto. Have we addressed that? Because there's so many people, and they're all leaving Brampton to go to another city. We can keep them here. And the example I give is the amphitheater. It's just basically just a stage and a big place for people to gather. I really don't see it addressed in here unless I missed it.
Through the chair to Councillor Dillon, I think you're right. I think to some extent that was an item that sort of came up at various intervals throughout this project. And I know through some very, very preliminary discussion that we had with our economic development people, and our festivals and events people, they've identified it as an issue that we need to look more closely at. We are challenged, of course, from a supply perspective to be able to provide for that kind of activity. We also, as well that our parks operations staff have done what they can to try to facilitate, small event space within neighborhood parks. But then again, even some of those activities haven't, the parks were never designed for that level of intensive use over a 1 or 2 day period. So I think, suffice to say, I think we need to do a little bit more work on that. But certainly from a land assembly perspective, that's going to play a part in determining how we can deliver on those larger events. I know with respect to the Gore Meadows site, of course, We do have property up there that we're going to work through a programming exercise on in the next year or two. There might be some opportunities there to have some dual use to accommodate for that. We also own some land on the other side of the valley opposite Gore Meadows, which might also be, that was always thought as being some place where maybe we could entertain some festival space. But I think in totality, we need sort of a fuller game plan, and this plan doesn't provide for that. That's going to have to be dealt with through a separate strategy.
Right, just because in a separate strategy, and I thought I would bring it to your attention as well, because I think a lot of the places we send them county court, they've been told it's too small, or different venues as well. So I really hope that we can keep that on our radar going forward. Again, we want to make sure that Bramptonians stay. They're all from Brampton anyways. We want to keep them in Brampton. The second thing is there's no mention of kabaddi. It's such a hot topic that the Kabaddi Federation of Canada is located here. There's an Ontario Kabaddi Federation as well. They're having real big issues getting Powerade. And a lot of the residents come from obviously the northwest, south, east of Brampton as well. But there's only one pitch in all of Brampton. They can't get that when they need to. And again, we had a lot of issues in the last little while, partly because a lot of it's their fault as well. They were a little bit slow in their scheduling, but we absolutely need more kabaddi fields. I was in contact with Ward 5 in Mississauga with Carolyn Parrish, trying, last minute to get them some type of field. They ended up going to one of the gurdwaras, the Sikh temples, who had an empty piece of land. They took all their stage and they took their stands and everything there. So again, thousands of Mahal people every week in the summer who were sending away to Wildwood Park or Paul Coffey Park. They're looking at Hershey now. And it's all Bramptonians basically who are watching it, tens of thousands at a time. We want to make sure we keep them here, and those dollars that they're spending, that we keep them here as well. So that's a really big, thing I didn't see that was mentioned in there. I was wondering if you could possibly respond to that.
Well, if I could, Kabaddi didn't come up a lot in the consultation, but we did recognize that there is a demand there. What we've done is that there is a recommendation that it's not specific to the sport, but it really talks about as groups come forward, if they can show that there's a demand and that there's a business plan going forward, to show the city and see if there's an opportunity or whether it makes sense for the city to partner or become part of that process for the sport. Because we do know it. I've spoken to staff in Mississauga, so I know that there has been some pressure to go into their city, but they had related that more to some conflict or some changes that had been being made at that moment in time that your current site couldn't facilitate it at that moment, but they felt that, my understanding was that it was a short-term blip. That may not be the case, but we did try to incorporate a recommendation so that groups do have an opportunity to prove their case that there is a demand for additional things, especially in cases where we really didn't hear a lot about a particular activity.
So if we have a meeting with them just going forward, we can get a meeting with them and discuss it with city staff, and then we could, possibly look at avenues going forward. Is that what you're saying? Because I didn't see them in the list of people, the groups that we did outreach to.
Yeah, if I may, Councillor, through the chair, I know we did have one meeting with one of the Kabaddi representatives. It might have been very early on in this planning process. Mm-hmm. We did ask for some additional information for them to provide us in terms of their the participation rates, whether or not there was any growth in the youth area. I recall that we sort of sent them back to provide us with additional information. We didn't, at least I didn't get that information back. And it didn't, as Todd said, it didn't really elevate through our various discussions we had with the community. So I think it's going to be, there is a partnership opportunity there, but it's going to have to require some feedback from the group to demonstrate that there is in fact a demand and that it's a growing demand within the city.
So we can get that, we can arrange that meeting. But in terms of, for example, Phase 3 at Gore Meadows, I think there's such a great opportunity to have some type of dedicated kabaddi field there. And just looking as well, this year kabaddi started in Peel Regional School Board. So it's full-time there. Surrey, BC, take a look at us, and now their federation has requested their school board to do it as well. So they got it up, so they're following our lead. And it is a growing sport, and I think it's up to them to really prove to city staff now going forward, because sometimes the field is available at power rated, but just because of parking issues, because there's 4 hockey rinks there, there's other events going on, just because of parking limitations, they're not able to actually hold their events. So we'll be in touch with that, John. Just a couple more quick things as well. Observations. When we're looking at the distribution of different fields or courts or whatever it may be, just looking at it just visually, right now we don't have any tennis courts in the entire East End. Like a whole 1/3 of the city lacks a tennis court, and I had a person just on the weekend just ask me about that. I said, listen, we'll get you an answer. And I know there's one coming at Gore Meadows, but if you look at the rest of the distribution, it's really located centrally. So I think if there's more opportunity going forward, I think because it's such a big demand that just the one spot might not be servicing all the residents. So take a look around. Indoor ice hockey, I think you gave the justification. There's less demand for it, so I can understand that. We got the one outdoor one coming there. Skateboard park, I'm pretty satisfied. It looks good. It looks like it's spread out enough. I know a lot of kids are into that as well. A couple things though. I think I've spoken to, I don't remember if it was you, John, the basketball courts, particularly in Ward 9-10 area. They're not being utilized to the fullest extent. And I think I was speaking to Rob about it as well. The intent, the design was that they put curbs there so that they'd be used for ice hockey. There's a link to some water there as well, but for example, in Tree Line, in 17 years I've been living there, I've never to this day once even seen anybody play ice hockey, but I've seen people get injured. I got injured there as well because of the curb. Seems to be a safety issue as well. Because of the curb, it just seems that there's a lot of debris piling up as well. If we can make it a dedicated basketball court, unless there is a demand for ice hockey, take a look into that. It'll make this court cleaner, and there'll be a lot more kids using it as well. So that's another observation. Baseball was kind of concerning to me. I know we have a few diamonds on Bramalea. Again, people from the East End, Castle Oaks area, Highway 50 are going to have to travel all the way over there. It'd be nice to see a little bit, it spread out a little. And soccer as well. There's only 2 right now in the entire East End. One's at Gore Meadows and one's near Countryside and Gore. So I think and I speak for, hopefully I can speak for Councillor Sprovieri and I as well. It seems like everything's more centralized, right? Whereas a lot of the growth has been on the East End, and I hope, and I'm sure that Councillor Sprovieri and Councillor Willens would like to see a little bit more growth out in the extreme ends as well, when that area is developed. But can you, sorry? I said your name.
Are you on the home stretch, Councillor Dillon?
Yeah, no, I'm on my home stretch, but can you give a response to that as to why on the ends we're not really seeing much of these facilities?
So through the chair to Councillor Dillon, so one of the things that we're doing in conjunction with the preparation of this plan is we've taken all of our outdoor facilities and we've sort of mapped them, and we are obviously recognizing that there's areas within the city where there's deficiencies, and so I think what you're going to find in the next couple of years is we will be coming to you, whether it be through the budget process or through a separate report, and we're going to try to identify for you where we think there are strategic locations that we can pinpoint for that kind of investment. You'll see recommendations within the plan that speak to numbers and general locations, but now we need to hone in on specific locations. I think as far as why there's none in the east end and the west end is simply a matter of the fact that, a lot of the facilities that exist within the more central parts of Brampton were developed many, many years ago.
Right.
And so it's now time for some of those areas as the communities develop to catch up a little bit.
And I'm going to finish off through the chair by saying this. And, I've always been a big fan of our staff going to, for example, conferences where they get to go, for example, to FCM and really see other facilities, more so, than counselors. Because they get to go and actually see things and see what other cities are doing, whether it's good or bad, and bring it back to here, and they'll give their recommendations or suggestions to council. Share a quick story with you. About 20 years ago, I used to play basketball at Wildwood Park in Malton, and the counselor there, Frank McKechnie, came over and he said, "Listen, you guys, court is cracked up. Would you like a new one?" It was not maintained for many years, and so what he did was he brought staff. Staff spoke to us, just as youth, and they were able to really get, hands-on feedback as to what needs improvement, what we would like to see. So I think even going forward, counselors, we can tell you as much as we want, but when you go to the people, unannounced, uninvited, and you really get their feedback, I think that's the best route to take. I know we can have all these input sessions and workshops, but a lot of the times the people don't have the time to come. So anyways, the court was built, it went from about 20 people playing to about 100 people playing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Medeiros.
Through the chair. I guess just to piggyback on what Councillor Dillon, the Kabaddi, I was surprised because I also, in my area, especially Brampton South, there's a huge community that, and I also get inundated with the calls and requests for Kabaddi fields and so on. So I do think that regarding the business case, I do think there will be a business case. Just in general, looking at, I guess, the recommendations, do we have an idea budget-wise? What's the envelope? What's the big picture? Because one thing is true is, I think staff does a great idea in sort of identifying what are the needs. But it's up to us council to say, how much is it worth our while? How much are we willing to make that investment? And that's sort of that brush reality that we need. And I'm hoping also that when it comes to budget, and I assume that this will be referred to budget for sort of that big picture and what can we really do, is also look at in terms of assets that are being underutilized. So if we have an asset that we maintain, be it a park or a facility, and it's not being used to its full potentials, what type of investment's there? And I look towards, and I think you did identify El Dorado Park. I go there running quite a bit. I spend a lot of time at El Dorado Park. It's really packed every weekend, and then the only outdoor pool that we have in the city that's, I guess, city-owned. I think there's a Heart Lake one, but I think that's provincially, if I'm not mistaken. It really just speaks to the fact that either there has to be an expansion or there has to be something. And then after you tie it in with our asset management strategy and some of the properties and things that we own, there should be that horizontal linkage to ensure that if there's city lands that we have that we can leverage and build some of this stuff, let's do it. Let's not sit here and hold on to it. So I'm hoping staff become aggressive in terms of give us the whole budget picture, these recommendations, what's the cost and everything, and what do we currently have from an asset perspective that we can use and utilize. So there is that short-term opportunity, but after there's that long-term horizon, because I think it really is worth it, and we should be seeking potential ways in terms of funding it, because that's really what it's going to come down to.
So through the chair, from a budget perspective, we do have a section within the master plan that sort of provides this sort of high-level look at some of the more, the more costly elements. I also had a discussion, we've had several discussions with our financial staff in terms of how these recommendations fit in the context of the financial master plan and whether or not there's sort of a synergy between those two documents. I would sort of characterize it this way. I think there's been some projections done in both our work and the financial master plan that kind of look at that macro level to see whether or not the range of recommendations we've got in here are affordable or not. And they're indicating they are. It's going to take a lot more sort of detailed analysis, detailed design work in some cases to ascertain precisely how much all these things might cost. But over a 15-year period, we think that it's manageable, both with development charges, with cash in lieu in some cases, as well as through tax. We recognize, of course, that tax is the most difficult, funding source to deal with. So we're relying more on the development charges and the cash in lieu side of things.
And just lastly, through the chair, I guess the user fees, I know we've always had to struggle to determine what is that magic bullet, what's that magic, because certainly we have to look at every avenue. And that is a tough conversation, and maybe it's not just across the board, maybe it's for specific leagues or, I don't know, but there has to be, certainly with all the demands, increasing demands, as we intensify, as we build this vision with Larry Beasley, certainly how this all comes into play, what city assets we have. We have a golf course, very, people are very passionate about the golf course, but I'm not sure if that's the best use going forward. I don't know, but a lot of those stuff, that's what I'm saying, that we really have to look at all our assets and become creative in how we can and do that and look at our budget as well. Thank you.
I should say that we as part of the master plan, recommended looking at a pricing strategy which would get at the heart of the actual cost of service, so that how much is it costing you for an hour of ice or an hour on the soccer field. And so when you look at your pricing, you'd be able to better understand what your recovery rate is and what it should be. Partnerships should also not be overlooked, and we do talk a fair bit in the plan about partnerships. And although they're not the be-all and end-all, they are something that can help to offset some of the costs moving forward. And so programs like the SNAP program with the conservation authorities, working with school boards and others, and certainly your community organizations in the programs that they offer are great partnerships. So opportunities to build on those we think will help as well. But we do know there's obviously some hard costs that you as the city would be looking at as well.
Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. A few questions for you. I went through the master plan. Looks great, a lot of work. Thank you very much for doing it. But I didn't see that multi-$100 million rec center in Ward 3 yet. So I hope you're still working on that, John, because I know that all the other wards have very, very large recreation complexes. Ours doesn't yet. So I'm hoping you'll put that in there very shortly. Right?
You've got all the business.
Yeah, we do. I wanted 19 pads of ice. That's including the 5 at Powerade. And we're talking about eliminating another one. And then if demand decreases to 80% usage, we're going to eliminate another?
Well, if it decreases to 80%, then you would do a more detailed analysis to determine whether or not you should maintain what you have or whether you would decrease. Because it could be that when you hit 80%, it is just on a down cycle. So you would need to look at trends and the aging of the age profile of your community, because you could have a lot of young kids that are just going to move into ice-oriented sports. A lot of communities, though, are struggling there, and Brampton's not unlike them. We're seeing a lot of softening of the shoulder hours, so those sort of early evening, late evening time slots that used to be filled without any problem are not being filled to the degree that they should be. And even the prime hours, so that you would see during the early evening, sort of 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock, and on weekends, should be filled really 95-100% capacity. They're not always that case. So it's just more of a, in some cases, cautionary to say that we see this happening in a lot of communities, that softening, where you get to a point where do you continue to put resources to a facility type that is not in as high demand as it used to be, or do you reallocate those resources to areas that are growing? So we see, there's been identified a number of different activities, whether it's basketball or kabaddi or others. Maybe it's a reallocation of where those resources are better spent.
Okay, there's also the opportunity to look for other uses within the city for that pad. I know that figure skating is growing, for instances, so as hockey declines and figure skating may continue to grow. So there's other uses for those ice pads. Because it's we're talking long-term, 10 years, 7 to 10 years to build another facility. And in that 7 to 10 years, we may have a demographic that's all of a sudden in 7 years, we've got a huge demand for ice, and we didn't take that opportunity, or we got rid of one ice pad. I just want to make sure that we're looking at all those things before we start getting rid of ice. I hate to see that. I hate to see that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's not to say that it has to happen tomorrow, but it's to say that we need to start thinking about this. Participation in arena-based sports, so like figure skating, hockey, is about half of what it used to be. So we were about 18% of the younger population participating. Now it's 9% Canada-wide. So that's a huge impact. And so it's just as communities grow, yes, you're going to see 200,000 new people, probably a lot of young families. But that, in some respects, just offsets the aging of the population. So the young kids are participating to a higher degree, 2 or 3 times a week, where the older adults that do play, they're participating at a much smaller percentage of them, and maybe once a week. So it's really just looking at that, and we think that when you hit 80%, if you do, that it would be a matter of looking at it more closely, not to say close it automatically, but let's look at it closely. Let's see what's going on. But also at the same time, if we're operating a lot of single pad facilities, maybe there's an opportunity, especially when they're aging, to consolidate and build twin pad facilities that are much more efficient from an operational standpoint. And that's part of why we've looked at the Mississauga-Embleton site as designing in the long term to be a twin pad facility should that demand continue and make sense.
Okay. And basketball, I'm glad to see that we're considering more basketball. Derek and I both had an instance 2 weeks ago where we're looking at trying to find a place for kids to play basketball in the county court area, and county court SNAP is there, so they're part of that as well. So we would love to see a court, half court, something court there for those kids to play with, because right now they're just playing on all the various streets that are there. Finally, I think it was at one of the meetings that I attended was at, I think, the Ching Curling Club. And I had mentioned there about the possibility, and I didn't see it, I'm looking at page 37, which outlines the parks and what goes in them, but we had talked about art installations in our parks, utilizing some of the natural or some of the local artists that we have here to put small art installations, and we do have them in some of our parks. But we did mention it, I had specifically mentioned that at that meeting, but I don't see anything about integrating our arts programs into Parkland here. Can that be considered at some point?
Well, I think, although it's not mentioned here, I think when you're looking at your parks and whether it's designing new ones or redesigning older facilities, that creates an opportunity. Typically, a cultural master plan or a master plan of that sort would provide greater emphasis on art in the park. But at the same time, it does need to be considered. So I would imagine that when you do consultation for new or older parks, that you would invite the arts and cultural community in there to encourage what makes sense. Because we do think it is a valuable component. It's just typically part of a, as I say, more of a cultural master plan. But certainly when we look at creating comfortable parks that meet the needs of your community, arts and culture is certainly a big part of that as well.
Excellent.
I know through the chair, Councillor Bowman, I know from prior work that we've done with the Flower City Committee with Councillor Miles, I know we considered, I'm trying to recollect, Councillor, a public art policy or at least some governance around the provision of public art in our public spaces. We're not averse to them by any means, and I know there's been some instances in the city where there's artists that have sort of taken the opportunity and created pieces within public parks. So certainly something that we can look at more closely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Willens.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Good job, John. Excellent job. I do have to make One comment, though, the diabetes rate actually is going closer to 1 in 7 now in this area, not 1 in 10, so it's something that we have to really address, and I'm glad that you mentioned you're working with the Central West Lead and other organizations, so that's great. No, this is great. It's a good job. I like the caption there, investing in Brampton through Parks and Recreation, whether it's a chance to stay healthy and active for the seniors, or whether it's a new toddler learning to skate to get into our programs. It's excellent through all this. But I guess the important thing really is to mention on the last page of the presentation that this is a flexible living document. So as a lot of the other councils addressed a lot of issues that they see through the various wards and parts of the city, it's important to remember that, you know, this is a living document. We can change. This can change the next year, the next 2 years. We can adapt as we grow, because the changes of the community, you know, the needs of the community are going to change as we go, for sure, whether it's more active transportation or whether it's more arenas for the kids to skate in. So this is a good job. It's very thorough, and thank you.
Councillor Kaleshi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think everything's been kind of taken care of. I think Councillor Dillon touched on everything too. Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Appreciate that. The one item that I wanted to see if we could get you thinking about was, I just had, when you were going through Mississauga, Embleton, and the possibility of outdoor arenas and the future of those, and have we looked into them? I know there's changing, they don't look just like the bowl over at Memorial anymore. They look very much like indoor-outdoor facilities, and I find that there's cheaper alternatives or cheaper solutions to building an actual arena. Did we look into those at all?
Well, I think that one of the things to consider is you're building a new facility outdoor. I know it's heavily roofed and so forth at Big Gore Meadows. Seeing the success of that facility and how the public views it or utilizes it would help to determine whether or not it makes sense to duplicate something like that or go in a different direction. We know that the traditional sort of flood a surface and have it freeze and for a lengthy period of time over the winter has been much more challenging in the last few years. But when we talk about multi-use courts, and I know Councillor Dillon had mentioned this, that the concern about basketball, but the multi-use courts is really an idea of, so you could flood it, the water would stay there, so when it is cold, it would freeze over and create an opportunity. But you do need a community organization or a couple of individuals that would take some responsibility to maintain that, as opposed to your city staff taking on that role. It's typically done in that manner. So I think there is opportunity through this planning process, and we have recommended a number of multi-use pads. At the same time, just to make sure it's clear, we've also recommended for each of the recreation planning areas that there be a full-size sport quality basketball court, so that it does eliminate those sort of barriers or curbs that are concerned with regard to safety. So we have tried to take into account progressing all different types of sporting activities and recreational activities as well.
And essentially, that's actually what I'm saying is the opportunity for something outdoors, and it doesn't have to be an ice pad. It could be in those cold months, but it could be so much more if you add in ball hockey in the summertime, basketball courts, either one full or two halves, and all kinds of sports. You could put in something that's something that would be interchangeable and very easy to maintain, but
absolutely,
bringing kind of the outside, inside kind of feeling.
And that was one of towards the end of the presentation, talked about, just the importance of people being outside and getting into the natural environment, and whether that's summertime or wintertime is we think, very important. So providing opportunities through facility provision, but also trails and so forth to connect the community, all very important. We did go into community centers and parks and see people sitting, and socialization was a big part of what they did. Our concern is that if they're sitting and only socializing and not getting off their seat and walking around and doing things, so we need to create parks and open spaces that get people involved and want to sort of do more than just come and
for the picnic or socialize or play cards, but perhaps be enticed to do a couple other things just to get active. Because we are very concerned about, diabetes and other chronic illnesses. You're quite right. That multi-use, multi-purpose, multi-generational is very much in our mindset.
Good. The updating the PRMP after the 5 years, and Councillor Williams touched on a little bit, but procedurally, how would council make any changes, or how would staff make any recommendations to change with it outlining that it has to be, for it to be updated after the 5 years? Maybe that's a question for staff.
Well, I can start, and staff can jump in if they'd like to. So our idea of the 5-year review is potentially it could be done internally with your staff. Alternatively, it can be done externally as well. It's really to make sure that the recommendations still remain relevant, and that it perhaps brings the plan 5 years further into the future as well, so that we start to think beyond 2031 and 36 and 41 as well. It's not to say, though, that this plan itself is intended to be written in stone. So we don't intend that every recommendation here will absolutely, that's what it says, so therefore that's all it should be. There's a lot of flexibility there. We know that things will change, priorities will change. There could be funding opportunities that become available that pushes something forward. There could be an opportunity for a partnership that pushes something forward as well. And there could be new ideas that we don't have a crystal ball, but we try to project into the future as best as we can, but we know that we're not perfect in that regard. It would be crazy to think that. But the document is intended to be very flexible. And so over the next 5 years, certainly some changes would be expected to take place, and certainly things put forward to council and brought forward by council that would be different than this. This is really a blueprint to say, if you implement this, we think it will get you to where you need to be, but this isn't the be-all and end-all. The 5-year review is really what we're seeing in a lot of communities, is really touching base to just make sure the plan is relevant, that you don't wait for 10 or 15 years to redo a plan, because that's a long time to be without a plan, and this community really has been without an endorsed plan for a very long time. And so council supports, as we hope you do, to endorse this plan today. It will at least be a blueprint going forward that sort of moves you in the right direction.
Good.
I was just going to offer, Councillor, that we're seeing things happen literally daily within our departments that I don't want to say they align with the master plan, but there might be slight deviations here and there. So I think we're going to use, as I mentioned in my portion of the presentation, we're going to use the opportunity to come back to you through the various committees to bring you updates and to bring you where there's maybe a slight diversion from where we'd recommended in the plan, or a complementary element. We will come back to you, and then what we can do every 5 years when we're updating the plan is to go back and test the demographics, test the trends, and see whether or not the recommendations still hold or whether they need to be amended. So we sort of keep saying, it's a living document, and we're going to continue to keep it as such.
In here it says the Parkland acquisition strategy. So when do we see that rolling out? And we have policies in place now that complement this initiative, and how are they going to affect the actual strategy?
Through the chair to the councillor. So we know from undertaking this plan that we have various areas within the city that are either oversupplied from a park supply perspective or undersupplied. So when we talk about a parkland acquisition strategy, we're really trying to figure out a way whereby we can go out and target perhaps opportunities within those undersupplied areas, or through the planning process when we're dealing with new communities, we'll ensure that we meet the service levels that we've identified. You're right, we have the Parkland Dedication bylaw is well positioned to be able to sort of deliver both the parklands and the cash in order to make things happen. The biggest challenges is when we're going back in planned communities, and the opportunities are limited in terms of what we can acquire. And of course, the price per acre escalates as well. So I think it's going to be important for us to work with our realty group and with our financial people and with you to try to identify what opportunities might exist and to see how we can utilize the cash and lieu reserves that we've got in order to sort of provide that equality around the city. And then when it comes to the new communities, whether it be Heritage Heights or out in the 427 community, we've also got some arrangements that we've already set up in 427 where we got a Parkland conveyance agreement, which will sort of help deliver the service levels that we've recommended in this plan. So lots of tools in the toolbox, just a matter of sort of implementing them selectively around the city.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to, and I agree with where Councilor Medeiros was going with the partnerships and in particular the uses of some of the facilities and some of the services that we're providing now. When I look on page 44, and it says, and I'll just grab the Indoor Aquatics Center, and it says the current service level is 47,254, and PRMP target service level is 60,000. Is there anything where in here where it says what essentially what we can handle, what our max out rate is of whether it be the aquatic centers, ice pads, curling sheets, fitness centers? Is there anything in here that tells me what our max is for what we currently have?
It's not so much creating a maximum. It's more about staying on top of the utilization of your facilities.
I know it's not creating a maximum. It's understanding what the maximum is, though. That's kind of what I was getting at.
So when we looked at aquatics, for example, so we recognize the current level of service. A large percentage of pool utilization is swimming lessons and things of that sort. So as the kids age sort of beyond the swim lesson bulk, the demands on pools becomes a little bit less. So we've tried to look at it from a long-term perspective, say that one aquatic facility per 60,000 population as a long-term target makes sense, that that you currently have capacity in your system to accommodate some additional usage. So before we build new, let's make sure we're using as much as the capacity that we have. Mm-hmm. And that's where we believe that the Mississauga-Ambleton Community Center comes along at the right timing for when that capacity will essentially be used up. Plus, we're looking at distribution as well, and we think that in the southwest area where the growth is particularly taking place, demand will also be generated specifically from that area. So we have looked at utilization of all different types of facilities, from soccer fields to ball diamonds to arenas and so forth. In the analysis, looking at utilization, looking at participation levels, looking at the age groups that use facilities more than other age groups and so forth.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for the report. I have a couple of questions. First of all, how influential was your recommendations based on the public consultation process, or was it more so with doing actually analyzing the what people what we're doing today and what the trends seem to be going towards, or did you have was your report or recommendation influenced much by the public consultation process?
Well, I would say that when I started the presentation, we essentially looked at a number of different things that would be inputs into a recommendation. So everything from demographics to utilization to geographic distribution, trends and best practices and so forth. Consultation was one component of that. And certainly we listened very closely to the public. We made a commitment to listen, to analyze their information, and to come back to them and test that. And we did do that. We felt that the public did inform us about both current activities that they're participating in and what they would like to see happen, but also new or emerging activities as well. And as much as, I guess an example might be cricket pitches. We heard from the various organizations involved in cricket what the demand is for it and what kind of growth they're anticipating, and the types of amenities that would be beneficial to have at locations. So it was very informative as well. So things that we heard is, as an example, is at a cricket pitch, it would be great. We have a lot of people on the field participating, a lot of people watching. If we had a batting cage there, we could have people also practicing it, so they don't need to take up the field for practicing batting. They can be in a batting cage. So we did listen very closely. So I think that we heard from the public from all different perspectives, and we created a number of different avenues for them to participate, from surveys to interviews to focus groups and workshops, so that it didn't didn't come from one source. It came from a variety of sources, from a variety of angles.
I see in your recommendation on page 113 specifically about the cricket pitches, where you're recommending a couple of them, one of them being at the Gore Meadows, and the timing is short term. Now, what does short term mean? Does it mean that it's going to be in the next budget, or what does it mean, short term?
Well, short term in terms of the master plan is 0 to 5 years, so within the next 5 years. One of those locations is at Gore Meadows Park, Community Park, so that really would be tied to the timing of looking at that entire park area. So if it's within the next 5 years, or if it was just outside that 5 years, then it would tie into that time process. But certainly the intent is to try to look at that within a relatively short time frame, because we know that there is some pressure. Certainly the groups have I would say, participated very heavily in this process. We saw them at a variety of events, and we did hear what they were having to say, and they did provide us with information that did indicate a strong demand and pent-up demand for space for fields.
Now, as far as I'm concerned, I think that should have been built already. I think the demand is already there. It's a huge backlog, and there was an interest by Cricket Canada, I believe, that they were actually interested in having a home here in Brampton for the whole GTA at a central location. And this is going back several years ago that we got this input from the organization. So is it up to now to staff to kind of drive this, or is it up to council to drive and get it done as soon as possible? How is this going to?
Through the chair to Councillor Spoviri. So as I mentioned in my overview, once we get through this process and we get the endorsement of the plan, hopefully from council, then we'll be off to the races. We've got the identification of these recommendations targeted to specific groups within the corporation. We're going to try to work within the timeframes that we've identified within the plan and bring forward recommendations for budget requests accordingly. So we're ready to go, really. Okay. And in many respects, we're already moving. A lot of the things that you see even within this plan, Derek and Al Meneses and others are working on implementation already. So.
Right. And what about the Northeast Brampton Senior Center? Again, there's a huge groups of seniors already in place looking for something really meaningful for to be active and deal with the issues that we talked about diabetes, to come up with programs, and so there's a dire need for having something in that part of the city. And what's I didn't see it on the list here. Is that short term, or is that midterm? Also short term? I didn't. I was looking for it, but I didn't. Short term?
So that was short to medium term, and the intent of that really was to recognize that finding a proper piece of land that would be well situated and to allow the sufficient population to be there as well. We do know there's a demand growing, and that a number of residents do travel to your existing seniors facility. The difference being, I guess it's tying in the population growth with finding the appropriate land and then working through the design process. And we felt that this community center for older adults in the East End could be something slightly different than what you currently have, that although it might have some very similar elements, it has the potential to have more of a hub feel where you would have other partners in the community, be it employment services and healthcare services and things of that nature, so that it creates a center, a focal point, or a hub for people to come to of that age group.
Well, and on that, I'd like to propose a motion that we move forward, identifying the proper location. I think some of us know what that location is. I think it just has to be affirmed and then move forward and try to get Peel Region as a partner, perhaps. And one time we were looking at the Ymca as they wanted to be a partner. Maybe they may be interested again. So maybe try to explore with them again if they want to be involved. So I think it's really critical that we start moving forward on that, because there's a huge demand already as it is. On the other issues about the Kabadi, now that was identified as a need. I don't know whether the Kabadi groups have actually come out forward and they participated in the process, or maybe they didn't. I know there's a youth Kabadi league in Springdale. I don't know whether they were consulted with or whether they came forward to express a need, but certainly we can get that for you. And actually, we had a site identified at the Gore Meadows, kind of at the back, where it would affect the rest of the public in the park, and the new residential is coming into the area. So we'll work on that and make sure that that's identified. And I don't believe it's a huge expense to put in a cricket pad somewhere, and so we'll work on that. Now, as far as the Southwest Brampton New Community Center, is there? And I don't know whether the library people or the members may know whether there's an anticipated library needed in that part of the city, but I would hope that it would do the same as we did in the Gore Meadows, that it would consult with the library and see if, because that's been a tremendous success, the Gore Meadows with the library, and so perhaps it can be replicated even in the southwest, and so the library should be consulted with that.
Through the chair to Councillor Spovier, yeah, that's something that I think has been on our idea for a long time, even back when we first started talking about the assembly of the property. So we have had informal discussions with Brampton Library about the capacity to do that, and I think that's something we will explore.
Yeah. And finally, just again, because the Gore Meadows has such a large property, 230 acres, I believe now it is, after selling the 10 acres to Erin Oaks, we've always anticipated that being a great events place for people in the summer. They want to go for picnics, they want trails, bike trails, walking trails. All these are very excellent ways to keep people active and get them out by riding bicycles, walking. And so is that being something still alive in this document, or is that something that we have to kind of keep alive just by speaking about it?
Through the chair, so we've identified a number of things that might be accommodated within that Gore Meadows site, and actually we're having a meeting in the next month or so with our staff in community services and parks construction to sort of work through a preliminary program and to work to the design stages of that park. We know that, as you've sort of referenced, it's probably long overdue in being advanced, and so I think we're ready now to do that.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John, don't let these other council members convince you it's so bad in their areas. When you said we'll look at ways of having them catch up, I wrote down to what? To catch up to our areas, where we'd love to have some of those brand new facilities that are being built out in, like the soccer center and Cassie Campbell's and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know where all this whining and crying is coming from, because they're getting all the facilities that those of us in the center haven't had for a long time. Councillor Bowman said that he's the only one in the area that doesn't have anything. I have a whole ward that has nothing, not even a meeting facility in Ward 5. So, you know, I'm the one to whine. Yeah, I'm pointing out the realization, not the fake news. And I'm jesting. I mean, we got to look at this as what's good for the whole city. This isn't particularly about each area. But there are some concerns I have in here. And when I think about parks and recreation, I think more about kids and seniors than anything else. And I don't think the document talks enough about that, about the focus on kids and seniors. And of course, there's focus on everywhere in between. But when we're planning things, I think that really needs to be more of a focus than anything else. I also think, and you did mention it about, both of you mentioned about the flexibility, because if we've learned anything over the years, we know things change and change quick. That's why we have, if you talk to them every 5 years, they can look at things. For instance, you know, when the Blue Jays won, we couldn't get enough ball diamonds in time after they won the World Series. And then now we have ball diamonds that aren't being used. We're on, and again I'm jesting, but that's not really jesting, we're on the cusp of an NHL hockey team that looks like the future is very bright for them. If they become very, you know, we're now talking about not having a ice pad that we don't need right now. 5 years from now, we may be wishing we had it back. So when we build things, we need to make sure that we're flexible in that. And you did talk about that, and I'm really glad you did. Councillor Bowman mentioned arts, and I agree 100% with him. This whole plan is about healthy communities, in my mind. Not just physically healthy, but mentally healthy too. And you go to some of the communities, and I've been to a couple where you see the art stuff around. I'm not an artsy type of person, but wow, that looks so neat. That's healthy mentally more than it is physically. And I'm really glad you talked about the outdoor physical type of use stuff too. That's also art in its way of being physical type of fitness type of things too. So I thought that was really good. I'd like to hear more about tennis, because it was brought up and then you mentioned about tennis, but from what I've seen over the last few years, tennis was really in a decline. When we were talking about the tennis downtown here, and talking about and the one bubble that we had over in Bramley, we learned that we had a lot of facilities around that really weren't being utilized at all. They had their outdoor ones, mind you, but and I know we worked with a tennis club downtown to try to get them to use those type of things. So if tennis is on an incline, then I want to see that before we start talking about doing anything for that. You know, around sports, you really got to think when you're doing a plan like this about what we have, not just in Brampton, what we have around. And I mentioned it, like the Blue Jays, the hockey teams, basketball. You know, basketball was, nobody was doing basketball, and well, there was very little until Toronto got a basketball team. And then all of a sudden, a lot of youth wanted to play basketball. If Toronto was ever to get an NFL team, Like, I used to be a CFL fan, but quite frankly, it's going downhill pretty quick too, from what we see. But if it ever got an NFL team around this area, we're gonna need football fields. You know, that's just the way we have to look at things. That's why I want to point out again, I'm very glad that when you talked about the flexibility of things and the multi-use of things, because that's the future, and we have to be prepared very quickly to change from one to another, because everything does things. But, and just one more thing, you know, I think we pretty much all recognize that walkability is the way of the future. And bicycle paths and walking and all that kind of stuff. And if we don't start getting people more outdoors, to me, it's terrible. I watch my kids grow up and I wouldn't say I forced them into sport, but I pushed them into sport, which was very healthy for them. I don't see that happening now. I don't know why. I just don't see, it's more of this type of thing, and games and staying indoors, and that's not healthy. So the better we can make our city more attractive for people to want to be out there with the kids, which I think people are starting to go that way again, better it's going to be in a healthy wise. And we talked about that at the region, and I'm glad to see we're talking about it here too. So I think the plan, this is very good. But the focus should be on the whole city, not just on each individual ward. We can talk about my ward later, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson, would you like to move the recommendations in the report?
Sure, be happy to.
And with Council's indulgence, or committee's indulgence, if I could make a few comments from the chair. We've been without a master plan, as you mentioned, for a long time, I think since '07. And so while there are some things that I think, it's obvious there's a lot of questions and comments, an opportunity to revisit and the flexible nature of this is really very good. Councillor Gibson's point about the flexible space, I remember when you couldn't get soccer pitches and then you couldn't get baseball diamonds, and there's been this constant, it'd be interesting to look at the historical ups and downs of those two sports. It is where there's an opportunity with the school boards, but understanding that the school boards do not maintain their soccer pitches or their soccer pitches and their baseball diamonds to the same level as we do. And so the operational cost to the city in that partnership, where we have to go in and upgrade them and maintain them to our standards if we're going to rent them out. We've had that conversation 30 years with the school boards, but maybe now's the time when we do that, and then we need to worry less about the cyclical nature of those two things. When I look at the maps, and what really is concerning to me, and Councillor Bowman and Medeiros and Gibson and myself, when you look at the west side of the city, at the extremities, for most of the services and programs, in a large part of the areas we represent, the service area is 3 kilometers. And it's fine to look at the Mississauga-Embleton Community Park. We don't know yet what that's going to look like, although you've identified what should be and could be there. It's not there today. And so when you look at from McLaughlin Road to the west side of the city, the western perimeter, and south of Beauvert, there's little of nothing. There's beautiful parkland. There's no indoor meeting space. And so, McCandless Park has got a nice shade shelter and whatnot. No indoor meeting space there either. And I'm not, maybe I'm doing the whining now. It was great to map it all out, but I don't see anything in the recommendations other than Mississauga-Embleton Community Park, which is, I don't know when it's on the horizon, but it's not going to provide any relief for that part of the world. And there needs to be something that is more short-term or mid-term than what that is. That's more of a comment. I do suggest, and I know that Councillor Gibson did mention, we'll talk about my area now, I do think that there needs to be, for area councillors who are interested, to sit down as pairs and go through it with our constituent boundaries and sort of talk about the specifics of our areas. I didn't see anything in there, for example, on the future of the lawn bowling club. And there's the one thing with the recreation programs, but I think there's a whole lot of other programming that is a piece of this that's not addressed specifically. So I think that you've done a great job. You've taken a huge gap of time where staff were really kind of feeling their way through the dark. And so was council, to be honest, and the community, and we were trying to react to the needs out there. This puts it neatly into one package, so I want to thank everybody for, I get a motion? Okay. Can I suggest, I mean, happy to put this forward, Councillor Sprovieri. Can we approve, you want it as part of the master plan approval? Okay, I'll read the motion. I think I'll read the motion. That a suitable location within northeast Brampton / Gore Meadows vicinity be identified for a seniors recreational facility, and that a potential partnership with the Region of Peel and/or the YMCA be investigated. You want them to get moving on it? Okay. Because I think there's a whole lot in here that we all individually would like, and that, I'm happy to, that was why I suggested actually that staff sit down with each pair of counselors, and I do think that the appropriate time to deal with this is budget. Sorry, I'm looking up there instead of here. Okie dokie. You're starting a whole conversation. Yes.
Through the chair, if I may, which may be of assistance, I would suggest that the recommendation number 3 will actually capture exactly what Councillor Sprovieri is asking for. So we will be returning to council on an annual basis as we start to implement the recommendations of this master plan, and included in that master plan is the identification of additional senior centers being required. So allow staff to go back, do our due diligence, which is what we're going to be doing anyways, and let's not presuppose that that location may be in any specific area right now. Let's do our due diligence, let's identify the requirements, and then we'll be coming back to council with specific recommendations as it relates to senior centers.
No, I think Gore Meadows should not be on that. That should be taken out. They're not suggest it should be Gore Meadows. So that can be spoken on.
Well, I think that I think what I'm hearing from the commissioner is that even if you take it out, a suitable location with northeast Brampton be identified for a seniors recreation facility. That is inherent in the recommendations and in the recreation master plan.
Yeah, it's fine, but I don't want them to wait another year or two before they start that
Okay.
exercise.
I'm going to, I've got speakers on the board. The recommendations in the report have been moved. I don't see them as, I see them as mutually exclusive of each other, that your motion is separate from the recommendations in the report for the Recreation Master Plan. I have 3 speakers on the board. Are you speaking to, okay. I'm going to call the vote on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and then we'll put forward your motion, and then I have 3 speakers to your motion. All those in favor of the recommendations in the report? That's carried. So the next, Councillor Sprovieri has moved a motion. I guess this is business arising from the meeting? That's where you're going to capture it? Okay. That a suitable location within northeast Brampton we'll take that out. A suitable location within northeast Brampton be identified for a seniors recreation facility, and that a potential partnership with the Region of Peel and/or the YMCA be investigated. Councillor Paleschi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm okay to support it. I think that it was, Al had indicated that all of that is kind of within that recommendation number 3. I'm not okay with supporting the wording of northeast Brampton. I would be okay with it saying East Brampton, but I don't know where you define northeast, and if there's an opportunity where it's not technically northeast, then, and it's a good opportunity, then why would, we wouldn't be able to look at it with that, so. East, I
Soon we'll
would,
have it all crossed out. So a suitable location within, in East Brampton. Okay.
which, but I guess that's now falling more towards, what Ala just mentioned, that it's already captured in number 3. Even the, the possibility of a partnership with the YMCA, that's,
Through the chair, as the Parks and Rec Master Plan, the recommendations is that we explore partnerships, we explore all opportunities to better deliver our recreational services, so that would obviously be part of the due diligence that staff would undertake. Absolutely.
so really, you have no concerns with this motion, because essentially it's already captured in the one we just voted on.
That's correct.
It's really just saying if you didn't get it the first time, we're going to hit you with it again. Okay.
Understood.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have we not already, I thought Councillor Miles had a motion that was passed that we'd already directed staff to explore another seniors center in the city?
Through the chair, yes, the work is we are undertaking that work right now, yes.
Yeah. So, we don't need this. I mean, I'm not even sure anymore where the other one that we have right now is. Because if you Google, years ago, if you Googled Brampton, the little Google thing would drop straight down into downtown. Now it drops straight down over somewhere in Madoc, I think, or the other side. A couple years ago. If you did it today, it might drop in, who knows where, Bramley. I don't know where the center is, Brampton is, so trying to put motions on the floor to tell staff where to put another one, we don't need to. All we need to do is say, which we've already done through Councillor Miles' motions, we need another senior center. Let's get on and find it. And Councillor Beauvais, we've already done it. We don't need this.
No, this is just to enforce the idea that move on, Madam Chair.
Well, then take out the east and just say, move on with reinforce what we've already done and move on with getting another senior center built. We're talking again about areas and we shouldn't be doing that.
They identified East Brampton
Okay, Councillor Miles?
I'd love to see a senior center in East Brampton. So, as long as it's stipulated it's the east side of town, that we explore those opportunities.
Okay, Councillor Dillon.
I think it would be beneficial for this motion because it would, rather than have, how do I put this in words, to basically narrow it down and rather than be part of a larger report that you bring back, it would encourage you to come back with staff to come back with something a little bit quicker in terms of, I guess, what we're already doing. And I know that 2 years ago we had, I think it passed unanimously that we need a study into the East End Senior Center. So I think I support the motion. I think it would expedite things a little and narrow the focus to bring it back.
Okay, motion is before us. All those in favor? That's carried. Opposed, if you want to put your hand up. Okay, good job. Thank you.
It's already in the recommendation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Todd and John, for that. Hopefully we don't do it all over again on Wednesday at council. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 7:13, because I think 7.3, oh, sorry, did I miss that? Oh, you're right. It's the approval of the shared servicing agreement between the City of Brampton and Daniels Corporation to facilitate servicing between the two condominium corporations on Sunny Meadow Boulevard. Someone like to move that report? It is in Ward 9. You move that? Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. The next item on the agenda then Mr. Clerk, is 7:13? Nothing in between got taken out of consent? Okay. Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 713, I'm just trying to get to it here. So I went through the report, and I know that, I attended all the open sessions that we had, the public sessions for the public, and I know that there was, in this report here, staff have stated that many residents expressed concerns. And I was there, and I wouldn't say that many residents expressed concerns. I know that I heard from 2 residents that had concerns. One is here today, and the other one is actually works in Heart Lake and has now since changed her mind. So I'm not sure why staff did indicate that. I spoke to a lot of residents at those 2 meetings and our town hall, and there seemed to be a lot of people that had kind of said the same thing to me about after the buildings in the Heart Lake at the corner of Conestoga and Sandalwood had kind of said the same thing. They would like to cash in on their asset. Their children have moved away. They are long residents of Heart Lake, and they would like an opportunity to remain in Heart Lake, and this is a good opportunity for them to do that. There was also another mention in the staff report that it was going to hurt the employment lands for the land, and as of right now, it's zoned retail, so there is no employment. If we approve this here today, then we'll be getting employment. So I'm not sure that is completely accurate as well. Also, with the here Ontario Street and the Bramley Road request, it's very similar in terms of the proximity to the industrial. That doesn't mention that in this. I was just kind of making note if members of council didn't know. So I'm still in very much support of getting more employment on this land than it permits, and I am also very much support of the kind of a vision of that whole northwest corner and the possibilities for redevelopment with employment with their higher densities, and maybe the possibility, the opportunity to have a mobility hub in this this major intersection that we have with our east-west commuters and our north-south commuters. And I don't know how to do that. I don't think we've ever looked at or mentioned, Bovaird and Highway 10 being, they're an opportunity for a mobility hub there. But I think in a future meeting, I'd love to sit down with planning staff to get a better understanding on how we're capable of doing that. I talked to Councillor Willens and I had a meeting with Blackwood, whom are here today, and they absolutely had some concerns and justifiable, but we had an opportunity to sit down and talk to them and try and make some tweaks to the proposal in terms of the residents not mixing with any of the truck traffic, and I assured them there, and I'll assure them here again today, if we do support this conversion, that you guys were there first. So any complaints that come in, it's kind of that you're the first ones to the punch. So I think that I can't say it'll fall on deaf ears, but I think that ball is in is in your court for that. It's a nice building. You guys have done an excellent job in the area of that. And I can't say that we've heard any issues in that area of any pollution or traffic concerns or noise concerns. So I have a motion that I'd like to put on the floor, and I'd like to, why are you shaking your head?
It doesn't have to.
No, I have it in my hand. I was going to read it. Do you want to read it? No. Okay. Madam Chair, can I read that?
Of course you can.
You're okay with that? Okay. So my motion is that the recommendation in number 2 in the staff report be changed to PISC support the conversion to permit the seniors residence at 10124-10144 Hurontario Street site, and that staff be directed to bring an OP amendment to the next meeting of council, and that the OPA include a special policy specifying the following. The first 2 stories having commercial to permit office, creating a mixed-use building. Ensure that the employment target for this site achieves or exceeds current employment through residential. In addition, no balconies be constructed on the building facing Ironside Drive. That prior to the adoption of the ZBL, the applicant demonstrate that the proposal meets the noise and air quality standards for the residential portion of the development in accordance with section 4.6 of the OP. And finally, that the building is sited and oriented adjacent to Hurontario Street with main driveway access onto Hurontario Street to provide an appropriate interface with the adjacent industrial property. And I can send that down to you.
Mr. Clerk, are you able to type that up and put it on the screen for us? As I do think staff should have an opportunity to see it as well. Can you prepare that while we go through the board? Councillor Spovieri. And I guess you're speaking to the amendment? Or you can speak to both?
No, I'm just speaking to the report.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question to staff. Now, if I remember correctly, when we had the report initially, the site in question, the permitted use was a commercial plaza. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, there's a combination of zoning, so because it's 3 properties, 1 property is zoned for industrial uses, the 2 other ones are zoned for commercial purposes, so any type of retail use would be permitted.
On both properties.
1 of them is industrial and 2 of them are commercial.
So
with a minimum GFA of office as well.
So the proposed application will it be occupying the 3 properties?
It is for the 3 properties, yes.
Sorry?
It is for the 3
The
properties.
3 properties.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess what I'd like to understand is what is, because they're proposing some commercial on the lower level and also on the second level, which brings employment. Is a real concern of staff is that the site is not really appropriate for residential? Is that what's really at the core of this, or because they are achieving employment with the proposed recommendation or motion that's just been introduced? So does that satisfy staff's concern that we were giving up employment lands or commercial lands?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the main concern with the conversion is not particularly with the jobs that would be on the site, but with introducing a sensitive land use to an adjacent employment area. So it's mostly for the adjacent uses once you bring the residential.
So you're concerned that if we allow this residential, it may affect what the adjoining lands could be used for?
To the north and to the west, yes.
it may restrict their usage because the residential, if it's approved, of the residential being in the area.
Yes. So the properties further south, they're already zoned for commercial uses, but anything to the west and to the north, it's industrial. So we would like to maintain that, and adding sensitive land uses would potentially affect those uses in the future.
So the industrial use lands, are they for M4, M2, M1? Do we know which classification of industrial it is?
I believe it's an M1 and M2 zoned.
Which allows outdoor storage and processing, is that correct?
M1 doesn't, but M2 does. So the ones further to the north would allow for outdoor storage.
Just to adjacent to this to the property that
yes, the ones to the north.
So it allows outdoor storage?
I believe so, yes.
And if we put residential, then that they will lose that designation?
No, it won't necessarily do that, but if they do require a license from the province, then it may affect how they function in the site.
Mm-hmm. So if I can suggest to the councillor that there should be a clause put in the approval, if it's approved, that to future residents that the lands to the north are zoned for M2, which allows outside storage and other industrial type uses, and so that they won't come in and complain if somebody comes to apply for that kind of use to the north. We should put some kind of provision in the agreement that, and I would suggest that should be mentioned if it's approved, that the residents be notified that when they on their purchase and sale that the lands to the north is zoned or allows M2, which it allows outdoor storage and so on. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Fortini. You're writing a motion. You want me to come back to you, Councillor Fortini? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. In the report, Economic Development agrees. I see Paul sitting here. Can I ask Paul a few questions? Thank you, Paul. You agree with staff about not supporting it for economic reasons, and I think our planners described those reasons. But for me, what's the overall impact? If this were to be approved, what is the impact economically on that area?
Through you, Madam Chairman. The idea here is that if you introduce a senior housing use within the area, you will potentially destabilize employment uses from growing or prospering where they are today. It is senior housing, it's fairly sensitive land use, as my colleague Claudia explained quite well. It has the potential to have a negative impact on the surrounding employment uses, and since senior housing, residential development, schools, daycare, nurseries, those are all sensitive land uses that you have to be careful when you decide to put them within proximity or abutting an employment zone.
Okay, and how big is the employment zone that we're talking about? Not including the land for the seniors residence commercial.
Through you, Madam Chairman, it's a long-standing employment area that's probably about 1,000 acres. It's a concession block for the most part. And it's been one of the city's long-standing employment areas.
Okay, because my concern, my fear is that, again, we're looking at a single block of a huge block, and we're making sort of plans for the smaller block without regard to what we have in the much larger block. Is that larger block already planned for?
Through you, Madam Chair, the whole area is to the west of this area and to the north, and it has been designated for employment uses, and it's been like that for quite a long time.
Okay, so the employment uses that this development will have, commercial, on 2 floors, is that the highest and best use that we're going to get out of this property? Because we're going from no employment now. The way it is right now, there's no employment there. By putting this on, we're creating some employment.
Through you, Madam Chair, my concern, or economic development's concern, is not so much about the office development that it's proposing as a component of this proposal. It's more to do with the senior housing, right? So sure, you may get a couple of stories of employment uses to go along with this, but as soon as you introduce that senior housing, you have the larger issue is with the surrounding employment uses that you have the potential to destabilize. And I think if you're going to weigh the two, I would caution you, and I would weigh on the side of excluding the senior housing component.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fortini, do you want me to come back to you? You're going to go back on the board? Councillor Dillon?
Thank you. It seems like there's been a lot of research done into this motion, and I would have preferred if it was given to us a little bit previous, just because there's so many details into it. But I have a question about 13.4 that was just provided just now, I believe. Malone Given Parsons is the land use planner, and I believe they sent this letter to, well, they provided this letter. What is the connection to this report, this letter to this report?
Through you, Madam Chair, they're actually referring to Appendix F of the report, which is a response to a motion that was placed by Councilor Pelesci on the May 31st Planning Committee meeting.
Does it have anything to do with the...
Not specifically with these 2 particular sites, but is related to the MCR.
Okay, so it's just a... Right?
That's the one you referred to.
Right, so this is just a general for our information, right? So this is nothing that we're really debating in terms of this.
No, it's a piece of correspondence that was received after the approval of the agenda stage today, but as of right, we can include it and receive it today.
Okay, so it's nothing to do with these 2 properties, though, is that correct?
That's correct.
Right, so I just wanted to know. What I really just want to say is this, though, that to go against staff's recommendation, I think, is not the right road to go down. In my opinion, I disagree with the when council decided to go ahead with the Kennedy Road townhouse complex that's being built behind the mosque. And I think this is the same situation as well. We don't know what precedent it's going to set and how it's going to fit in the overall area long term. And I really stress the Kennedy Road one, because we don't know what's going to happen long term around the power rate area. It might be, a lot of potential there. If you take a look at the east end of Brampton, where this, what this is referring to, the 44 acres, the TAC area, I kept asking staff during that time, why are we giving up all this employment land? They said, well, there's certain pockets that really can't fit in to the grand scheme, the larger equation. And I would give another example. Well, what about North Park Drive, where you have, residential and you have industry there as well. And so you see certain pockets on Nexus Road, I believe, in Fogle Road, where, in my opinion, even in my opinion now, this TAC land on the 44 acres is prime employment land. And from what staff had said after the MCR is we really have no options left. Even though it's employment, we really have no options other than to build residential there. So if, I don't know what precedent this will set for, our, I think as Paul has mentioned, this is probably our oldest piece of employment land. So I don't know what precedent it will set if somebody will come in and say, listen, we want to build something else there. It might be nice, but overall when we look at employment, it might be nice for that immediate area for the short term. But in terms of the long term, I don't think it's a good precedent to set, because we're taking away from employment land. Once you lose employment land, It's never coming back.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Can you state your point of order?
You're indicating, are you talking about the site that, that I'm talking about in the motion? Because you had just mentioned that it's taking away employment.
I'm about to get to that. I still got to differentiate what type of employment it is, so you can ask after this.
No, I'm asking you.
Councillor
were you-
Pleshy, can you go back on the
Maybe let me
board,
finish,
please?
and then you can ask.
And
You get on the board.
Councillor
No
Dillon, if you
disrespect,
could make
Councillor.
your
No,
I'm
point.
just trying to understand.
Where was I?
My apologies from.
No worries. So what I'm basically saying is that I don't think it sets a right precedent. And just to go off what Councillor Plush is saying, okay, now I remember. I'll get back to that in a minute. The employment, when we define employment, so we're at 32.9% employment now. Council said we want to get to 40. Our goal was 37%. The type of employment, for example, for commercial, that's not. Does that meet the criteria when we talk about activity rate and when we're talking about employment lands? Because from what I remember, retail, et cetera, doesn't count into the equation when we talk about employment lands. Is that correct? So there's a difference.
Through you, Madam Chairman, the amount of commercial employment that would be generated by this site would contribute to the city's overall employment number.
Because from what I remember, when we were going back to this letter here for TAC and the 44 acres, employment land doesn't count. When we talk about employment from employment lands, we don't take into consideration, or overall when we talk about employment, we don't take into consideration those retail or commercial. That's at least what I remember.
Through you, Madam Chairman, with regard to the TAC application, we did implement a employment target that would deliver the amount of employment that could potentially be generated by the existing zoning provisions on the TAC lands.
As chairman, I'm stepping in because we're not discussing the TAC application. There's recommendations before us today. One is to approve the conversion at 69 Bramley Road. The other is to not support the one on here,
Right.
Ontario Street. So I'm going to ask you please to limit your comments to
The reason why I'm bringing that up is to basically build whatever case I'm making in terms of the employment, just to contrast them as well, just so we have an idea.
While you're building your case, I did just check with the clerk. We passed a procedural bylaw that gives you 5 minutes to speak, plus another 5 minutes.
Okay.
You had great latitude on the earlier issue today and had, I think, 19 minutes.
There's 15.
And I've used up a little bit of your time. I will let you, I understand you're building your case, but if you could get to the salient point of your question.
The reason why I say I'm building a case, I'm building my point rather than
Well,
case.
build your point within 10 minutes.
I will build it within 10
Okay.
minutes. And I think there's a lot of latitude to give it to everybody. I'm not sure why in this specific case that we got to limit it to 10 minutes.
Well, I'm asking you to limit it to the issue that is before us, which is the staff recommendation
And what
on
I'm
the
saying is
two
related to that,
conversions.
though. Everything I've said is related to this. So, again, interrupted probably 2 or 3 times so far. The point I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't set a precedent, and we shouldn't support the motion, and we should support the staff recommendation as well. We're lagging seriously in terms of jobs in the city. 32.9% doesn't cut it at all. 37%, in my opinion, doesn't cut it at all. Take a look at the surrounding areas, surrounding cities. Everybody's moving ahead. We keep saying every time we come to council, we're doing well, but you got to look realistically as well. When we have employment in this land, in Brampton, we have more employment. We're basically balancing out the tax burden for our residents, which they claim is already high. I agree with them. We cut down congestion. We create opportunity. We create a more balanced city. And if we set the precedent now, who knows what could come for the rest of the remaining surrounding areas as well. So this motion's coming up last second. It's very detailed. We should have had more indication and more notice given to it. So I can't support it. And the reason why I brought up the TAC lands is because we're comparing the same thing. We received a letter right now that's related to this report, so I think it's fair that I build my case up or build my point up. And I don't appreciate that I get cut off all the time when I'm trying to make a point, and nobody else is given 10-minute time limits either.
Councillor Miles, Councillor Frattini has signaled that he is ready with his motion. And don't fight over it.
Yeah, I'm on the floor to talk to
The
69
recommendations?
Bramley Road.
Okay.
He wants to talk to the TAC.
I just want clarification.
Well,
So, go ahead.
okay, I'll go through, if you would like to get your name on the board, that makes it more logical for speaking purposes. Councillor Miles.
Thank you. So, I keep reading this report over and over again. When I first read it, I thought you were supporting the 69 Bramley Road. And then when I went back in the report, I thought it was saying you don't support the conversion of 69 Bramley Road.
Well,
Is this
I read
report?
it that they did.
Well,
so-
I know, so I read it, I keep reading it, and I keep getting two messages. So could someone please clarify, is this recommendation approving 69 Bramley Road to move forward, but also with the recommendation to look at the two adjacent properties?
Through you, Madam Chairman, on page 7.13-1, recommendation number 3 clearly sets out the approval for 69 Bramley Road and that the official plan amendment be brought forward to council for adoption.
Okay, good, thank you. Sorry, I looked at it and then I kept back and forth. So I'm happy with that, I support that, thank you.
Okay.
And do you want me to clarify the TAC one?
You might as well have your own words. Jump ahead there.
Okay, so this is just a letter for information, basically saying they don't have any problem with it, right? The TAC letter?
Yes, it's a response to the Appendix F.
Yeah.
That we're talking about the motion regarding Heritage Heights.
Yeah, so it's...
So it has nothing to do with 69 Bramley or the here in Tarvis.
No, it doesn't have anything to do with the report. It's just putting them on record saying that they don't have any issue with it, right? So, because TAC's already approved.
It is, yes.
Yeah, so there's no debate about that. It's already been done. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, through the chair. I guess there's a lot of, I'm going to support staff recommendations. I think it's aligned with, Councillor Dillon and Councillor Bowman questioning is how important, our employment lanes are, and our council committed to a ratio. And it requires decision-making to be disciplined and in support of, the big picture. And I think that's an important concept here. Just regarding, I guess, through the chair, how important, when you look at all the different corridors or industrial corridors that we have throughout the city, would you rank this as one of the important areas that we have in the city? Is it fair to ask that, or how significant is it, would you say?
Through you, Madam Chairman, it is a long-standing employment area. It has significant employment uses within it. And it's our view that it should be protected from the introduction of sensitive land uses.
And through the chair, we have no indication that any time in the near future that, be it owners or be it industry, industries which are represented in this area, that there will be a change of uses, or there'll be some form of wave of, reconversions or any of that. So essentially, residents will operate surrounded by, this type of highly impactful industrial use.
Through you, Madam Chairman, planning and cities are always changing. It's our intention to maintain this area as an employment area. Having said that, there may be some pressures along the Beauvais frontage for some redevelopment over time, but we don't see that happening in the short to midterm.
And just through the chair, I guess from a planning principle, you never want to just specify, within a broader area, because, one thing that, and I think, Councillor Dillon rightfully brings up an example, is that when you try to look at, and that's been the problem of the past, of trying to throw in these little planning projects which really differs and sometimes negatively opposes, I guess, the broad picture of what you're trying to do, especially when we're talking about employment.
Through you, Madam Chairman, I think you're quite correct, Councillor, that this is almost a one-off, if you think about it, and it's not a planned area for residential uses, and it's not intended to be one for residential uses. So, again, our objective is to maintain the employment within the area so that it continue to operate within existing permissions and also the permissions that are in their bylaw, so that if they transition over time, they won't be impacted by sensitive land use.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you. I hope I don't get interrupted while I speak, as I usually do. I want to confirm one more time again. This letter that says it's going to be added to this report 7.13, what is the intention of having this added as correspondence to this report?
Through Madam Chairman, if I could respond or try to respond to Councillor Dillon's question. What I think the TAC letter is trying to achieve is the fact that they have converted some employment lands, and that their employment target, which is established in the official plan amendment that Council adopted, is being delivered through the development process, so that there's no net loss of employment, and that they will essentially not impact the planning target for employment lands in Heritage Heights.
But this isn't in Heritage Heights, though.
No, through you, Madam Chairman, they're speaking to the target that's in Heritage Heights of 300 hectares of employment lands, and that that their proposal and their conversion will not impact that target to be increased.
So, but what does it have to do with this specifically, though?
If I can, I think what TAC have done is taken advantage of the fact that there is a report on the agenda today that speaks to the MCR, and that they wish to be on the public record as having commented on it.
Right. Fair enough. And just since this is added to this report, I'll leave it at that. I'm just going to just say one more time. I think, we've made some really bad decisions in the past. Whether you're converting 1,500 acres of employment land to residential. We've only, it hasn't benefited anybody, it's only benefited a few people. And the real people who don't get benefit from it is our residents. And let's not keep making the same, you can clap, it's okay. We can't keep converting land, and everywhere we have prime place to build employment or keep employment land, we can't keep converting it in one-offs. It doesn't make sense because it screws everything up around it. And I'm not sure what the purpose or intention of it is, or how it benefits the entire area, the city. There's much better areas where we can have projects like these as well. So it seems like I'm the only guy who keeps repeating this. I'm not sure what the rest of council has in terms of jobs and keeping our employment land, but I really hope for the benefit of our residents, that we can make the right decision today, not do these one-offs continually. Thanks for not interrupting.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Were staff in support of the conversion of the employment on the Martin Way project on Hanson Road to residential?
Through you, Madam Chairman, I'll try to respond as best as I can on that one. I don't believe that was a conversion.
Yes, it was. The second floor was...
Oh, the office space.
Office space. And we were told at the region that the City of Brampton staff were okay with it. That was the conversion of employment to residential.
Through you, Madam...
Which, by the way, a couple of us voted against. Some of us voted against at the region.
Do you want to answer that?
I got it, yeah. Through you, Madam Chair, that's the Martin Way project. That's an interesting project. What's actually permitted on the site, from my memory, is commercial uses, office uses, and residential uses. So all three of those uses within the center area mixed designation are permitted. Therefore, if it's within the center area mixed use zone or designation, it's not considered to be a conversion according to the conversion tests or the MCR stuff that we're talking about today. Now, in principle, no, economic development staff didn't like that they converted that second-story office to residential. We would have liked to have kept it there. I think it would have been a significant employment boost to to that area. Thank you.
I guess my point is that an application came in, was approved both of the city and the region for employment uses on a second floor. And then when it came back to change it to residential for the developer, the staff supported that, both here and at the region. And I'm just pointing out, not to get in debate with staff, I'm just pointing out that things change. Sometimes things do change. And as, you know, we had this debate back, the conversion debate back a few months back, I pointed out the Brampton bricklands where it didn't make sense to leave a hole in the ground full of explosions every day, and things changed. And that, you know, you have to look at each one of these projects as they come in on a one-off sometimes. I'm not debating whether this is good or bad. I'm just saying that happens. It's easy to say, don't convert, but that doesn't make any sense, and it's not the responsible thing to do. You have to look at each individual case. I'm not criticizing anybody that voted for the Hanson Road thing. It happened. It's done. I didn't agree with it. But staff at the region, staff here supported that. So just pointing out, you don't always have to listen to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is my second time, right? Thank
Yes.
you. Just wanted to make sure. Do we know what the provincial standards for separation for industrial to residential are?
Through you, Madam Chairman, it depends on the class of industry that we're speaking to, and the classes of industry are categorized by the type of operation, whether it's 24/7, whether there's truck movements, emissions to the air. So there's three classes essentially, and each have their own separation distance.
So the only separation distance that I could find that I related to this was a 70 meters. What would that be? What would that be classed as?
That's a class 2, through Madam Chairman, that would be a class 2 industry. There would be some debate whether this would be a class 3 industry, considering it's a 24/7 operation with truck movements, truck traffic.
There'd be some debate, but it's a class 2 now?
Through Madam Chairman, I'm not sure what class it is. You'd have to sit down and compare it, but likely it would fall probably on the class 3 side.
Okay, and what's the separation distance for class 3?
Typically, it's about 300 meters.
300 meters, wow. That's not even 300 meters. You get to all the way to Sun Forest for 300 meters. There's a lot of houses in between there. But this is 100 meters that the building is set back from the current industrial. Paul, when Councillor Bowman was asking his questions about the adjacent development, I got the feeling that you were indicating that there was more development to come, when essentially it's just it's just north of the site is what's left for development, correct? Or
Through you, Madam Chair.
Or north of the site, because there's a gas station.
Madam Chair, there could be some existing employment uses there that may want to expand, grow, put some other uses on the site. That
on which site?
On any of the employment lands that are within the area. There's some existing uses that are there,
For
and they may want to expand.
Okay. And then just to Councillor Medeiros' point, where this, you indicated that it could negatively impact, and you're absolutely right. It could, but it could also positively impact this area. Specifically speaking to that whole northwest corner that I had said at the previous meeting where we initially started discussing this conversion, and the possibility for that whole area, the northwest corner of Bovaird and Highway 10, to be redeveloped into something nice. But that's getting into what I had stated earlier, so I don't want to start overlapping myself here. Councillor Williams on the board, and I was happy to ask for the motion to be put on the board if it was written.
Yeah, what I'm going to do...
You're the chair.
Yeah, I'll manage that piece, thank you. Councillor Willens.
Thank you, through you, Mrs. Chair. I find it difficult. It is a tough area, but it's been a tough area for a number of years. I mean, I've lived up in that area for close to 30 years now, and nothing's happened. So This is, it's a tough one for me, but I think with some of the changes that Councillor Pellecci has made I could support his motion, even though it is a tough one. We do want employment, but I don't know if this is a seniors, I guess when you're talking seniors residence, Paul, or are you talking seniors facility, like senior buildings, like where is it care, seniors care? Because I believe this is a senior living, like apartment buildings or condos or whatnot. Is it?
Through you, Madam Chairman, we understand it's a seniors building that is essentially independent living. That's as far as I
So it's
understand.
basically just people that want to downsize from a larger home into a independent, like a condominium, like a condo. Like my mom and dad did 20 years
ago.
ago.
Madam Chairman, I really can't comment on that, but we understand it's for
Okay,
independent living.
okay, no, I'm not debating with you, but okay, but no, I understand, okay. Okay, that's all, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you. Through the chair, just the staff, do we have knowledge of landowners in the area who have businesses or own land over there at the Bavaria to Ontario access? Because I know back in the day they expressed concern about, I guess, this type of development sort of impacting in the city, basically looking at one specific site and not looking at the broad area, which we're recommending. Because I know I've had several business owners and land owners at the time express concern. And I see in the report that only 10 showed up at the public meeting. They expressed some concerns around it. But I would imagine that for putting in that seniors residence, I guess folks who do want to do some type of expansion or change, they would like the same opportunity as you're putting a seniors residence. They would like the same opportunity to reconvert as well. So if they own A, B, or C and they see that the seniors residence is going to be reconverted, they themselves might say, well, I'd like to put some residential there. Is that part of a fear that we would have from a planning principle, or is that staff's position?
Through you, Madam Chairman, Councillor's correct that if they see there's activity on the residential side being introduced in this employment area, they may want the same opportunity. So that's why we are not prepared to support this application at this time, because we still think this is a long-standing employment area that has potential to continue on.
So through the chair then, how would we, and this becomes a very difficult, I guess, I'm not sure if it's a precedent, but if we essentially say we're going to put a seniors residence today, and tomorrow someone who owns a hardware store says, well, I want to build a couple of towers. And they come in, and then we basically lose the integrity of our decision making, because it really becomes piecemealing. Senior residence here, tower there, something else. I'm not sure. I'm not a planning expert, but that rationale then goes out the window if we're saying that we want to maintain that area for employment lands and industrial use.
So through you, Madam Chairman, so what the councillor is basically referring to is sort of incremental planning decision-making. That's not done on a comprehensive or area basis, and I would support the councillor in the fact that if we are looking at an area that is to transition over time, that it should be done comprehensively and not on a one-off basis.
So through the chair, that could happen. So for example, with a person like Larry Beasley, and we're looking at the overall city, nothing says that he can't look at that area again. And part of the study that staff does, that you eventually say, well, this is a big industrial area for us, but we have already some interests like the seniors residence or like other things, and we might want to consider long-term converting. So that still could happen.
Through you, Madam Chairman, yes, it could happen, but you have to be careful what kind of message you send when you start introducing these kinds of uses or the thoughts into an area. It could potentially start to destabilize it. So, everything has to be looked on a comprehensive basis.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Miles.
Call a question, please.
Well, I don't think you can, but there's nobody else left on the board because you've already spoken on it. I've received some advice from the clerk, and it seems the best approach for this report is to call the vote on number 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. and that number 2 we'll vote on separately after the amendment that's proposed by Councillor Paleshi. Everybody in agreement and okay with that? So
Can we just do them individually?
well, number 2 we won't be voting on because there's an amendment, and that's why I was going to vote it on the package 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You okay with that? You want 3, 4, and 5 done okay. All those in favor of receiving the report? What?
I have a question.
Okay, what? I thought it wasn't very polite, I'm sorry. Yes, Councillor Paleshi?
It's one of those days, Madam Chair, I get it. I was just wondering if there's, for in Appendix F of that report, there's my motion that was referred back to staff. Is there going to be an opportunity to vote on that today?
Through you, Madam Chair, if I could be helpful, the motion from Councillor Paleshi that was referred as item 10.2 on today's planning agenda, and staff have identified in the appendix to the report that we're dealing with now a response to that. So if that response is satisfactory, then a possible motion could be just to receive the motion under 10.2.
Okay, so that's something we haven't jammed that into this report. Okay, we're going to be dealing with that after. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. I'm calling the question on receiving the report. All those in favor? Carried. All those in favor of number 3? You want a recorded vote on 3, 4, and 5? Okay. All those in favor of number 3? Yes, I will let the clerk take this vote.
All in favor of Clause 3 as shown on the screen, please stand to be counted. Showing in favor is Councillor Miles. Councillor Fortini.
It's the conversion of 69 Ramilly Road.
The vote we're taking is on in staff recommendation 3 as printed and shown on the screen. Showing in favor is Councillor Miles, Councillor Fortini, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Medeiros, Chair Moore, Councillor Esprovieri, Councillor Willens, Councillor Paleshi, and Councillor Gibson. All opposed, please stand to be counted. Showing opposed is Councillor Dillon. Madam Chair, Clause 3 carries 9-1.
Okay. You want to call the vote on 3? Do you want 4 and 5 separate? Separate? Okay.
On Clause 4, as printed and shown on the screen, the staff recommendation, all in favor of Clause 4 stand to be counted. Showing in favor is Councillor Miles, Councillor Fortini, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Medeiros, Chair Moore, Councillor Sprovieri, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Willens, and Councillor Gibson. All opposed, please stand to be counted. Showing opposed is Councillor Dillon. Madam Chair, Clause 4 carries 9-1. In regard to Clause 5, which is shown on the screen, all in favor of Recommendation 5, please stand to be counted. Showing in favor is Councillor Gibson, Councillor Willens, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Sprovieri, Councillor Dillon, Chair Moore, Councillor Medeiros, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Fortini, Councillor Miles. Madam Chair, that Clause 5 carries unanimously 10-0.
And all those in favor of number 6? I don't think it's a recorded vote.
Okay.
All those in favor of number 6? That's carried. Thank you. Now, Councillor Paleshi's motion is replacement on number 2. You want a recorded vote on number 2?
So this is the amendment?
This is the amendment as proposed by Councillor Paleshi to replace number 2 in the report, which is a recommendation that it not be supported.
I don't need to speak. I don't know why I'm on.
Well, I think everybody can read it on the board that recommendation be deleted, number 2 be deleted and replaced with the following, that the conversion be supported, and then the rest is okay. That the first 2 stories having commercial designation to permit office use, creating a mixed-use building, ensuring the employment target for this site achieves or exceeds current employment targets through redevelopment, and that no balconies be constructed on the building facing Ironside. The rest is housekeeping, correct?
The request under number 2 is to bring the OPA on Wednesday. I don't know if that's possible. Staff would come. I throw that back to staff.
Is staff, can you respond to that? That staff be directed to bring an OPA to the next meeting of council? If this passes?
I think June 21st would be a little quick turnaround time for an OPA. Perhaps we could push that to a subsequent meeting.
Well, we do, yeah. We will be discussing later today, August the 9th, as a
Correct.
Meeting for
Which would
12
be
reports to come forward.
Administratively, a little more palatable.
All right, are there, Councillor Miles, are you on the board? Okay. All those in favor, so you're changing that to a subsequent? Yeah, well, if it's ready. Okay. No, seeing no questions on the board, we'll call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation before you?
Yeah.
Did you ask for a recorded vote? Oh, I'm sorry. You asked for a recorded vote on this?
So we both did.
A recorded vote has been requested, Madam Chair, for Councillor Paleshi's motion. All in favor of the motion as presented on the screen, please stand to be counted. Showing in favor is Councillor Miles, Councillor Sprovieri, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Willens, and Councillor Gibson. All opposed to the motion, please stand to be counted. Showing opposed is Councillor Fortini, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Medeiros, Chair Moore, Councillor Dillon. Madam Chair, that motion loses on a tie, 5-5.
Okay. So that leaves us at, it essentially, well, I would argue that a tie vote to reverts back to the staff recommendation.
That's right.
So the vote to approve it failed. Therefore, meaning
Through you, Madam Chair.
You don't have to vote on it because we essentially said that it was approved or not approved.
Through you, Madam
Okay.
Chair. So of the motion, staff recommendation 2 has not been properly moved or introduced by a member. The motion that was introduced was Councillor Paleshi's motion to strike out 2 and replace. That lost. So if a member wished to move staff recommendation 2, that could be a proper motion before committee.
So what if
Well, somebody needs to move recommendation number 2. Moved by Councillor Dillon. Councillor Paleshi.
I'd like to defer staff recommendation number 2 back to have a meeting with staff to better understand their comments in terms of the comments made by, my apologies here. The comments on the public coming out and being against the proposal, the employment numbers for an application like this.
So you're referring it back to staff so that staff can meet with interested councillors to discuss the public consultation?
Yes, please.
Councillor Dillon? On the referral.
deferral? Well, I'll speak to the deferral.
Is it it's a referral back to staff.
So can I just clarify why you want to defer it again? Sorry?
He's
You're
referring
or
it.
You just said deferral though.
A deferral would be to a subsequent meeting.
So we want to refer it back to staff to go over to clarify the public comments?
Comments made by staff from the public consultation session.
Can we get more clarity, I guess, into exactly?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is a proper motion that the councillor's placed.
Perhaps staff are you guys clear of what is being asked right now?
Through Madam Chairman, I understand the councillor is asking for staff to understand what the public said at the June 6th open house that we had, and maybe also the written submission that was provided by the warehouse owner abutting the subject lands. But I'm just speculating here.
So would the councillor like to respond? So the referral says that staff will go back and get the public comments and I guess the surrounding landowners. Can you confirm
There's,
that?
if I can, I think there is a dispute or a dispute over what staff believe they heard and what the area councillors believe they heard from the community. The referral is to refer it back to staff so that they can gain a better understanding of the comments that the area councillors are hearing versus what staff heard through the consultation.
So if the area councillors, I'm not understanding why this wasn't referred before. If you didn't understand what the public comments were, like if you're going to make a decision without knowing that, I'm not sure why we made this. We got up to this point so far. So you want clarification, but you're making a decision based upon not having clarification. Now you say, let's go back and get clarification. Is that correct, or?
Councillor Dillon, rather than engaging with the
I'm not engaging,
councillor who's
I'm
moving
getting a better understanding of the
I'm
referral.
going to presume you're not supporting the referral.
I know, I just want to get better understanding. I'm respectfully asking the person who moved the referral.
You must have more dialogue.
No, I understand that, but if you get a major decision like this, and now the councilor's saying that he needs more information on what the public said, but why wouldn't you ask for this before?
Councillor Dillon.
It's a fair question.
It is also a fair motion to refer it back.
And I'm getting better understanding on the referral, so just a better grasp on it. So if he doesn't want to answer, that's fine. I'm going to speak against the referral. And I want to ask one question. How long has council had that information? Where they provided the information, or how long have you guys, in terms of the public comments, when did that come back to us?
Through you, Madam Chair, they are attached, there's a summary of the comments provided that are attached to the report. So I'm assuming that was about 2 weeks ago when you received the package for this meeting?
We've had ample time. In your opinion, is that enough time for councillors, or would you recommend more time?
Through you, Madam Chairman, I can't comment on the amount of time required, but if...
Is it standard?
Well, we've increased our notification on the agenda so that there's longer periods of time for council to review them. So we think that 2 weeks would be ample time.
Something smells weird, but okay, I'll go against the referral.
We'll call the question on referring it back to staff. All those in favor of referring it back to item number 2, back to staff.
A recorded vote's been requested on the referral motion. All in favor of the referral, please stand to be counted. Showing in favor of the referral is Councillor Miles, Councillor Sprovieri, Councillor Palesci, Councillor Willens, Councillor Gibson. All opposed to the referral motion, please stand to be counted. Showing opposed is Councillor Fortini, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Medeiros, Chair Moore, Councillor Dillon. Madam Chair, that motion loses on a tie, 5-5.
Councillor Dillon has moved recommendation number 2. And Councillor Fortini, you've asked for recorded vote on this. All those in favor?
Can I get clarification from the clerk if it doesn't pass? If it doesn't pass, what happens?
Well, I think we have a bit of a dilemma.
So maybe you can just explain, I guess, for the information of the audience.
See, the clerk and I disagree on this. My position on it as the chair would be that the recorded vote to support the conversion lost. By default, to me, it reverts to the staff recommendation. But the clerk disagrees, and he's the professional, so.
What are our options after that, if I can?
If we have a tie vote on it, on all motions, Councillor, Mr. Clerk, what happens?
She's not going to be here.
Next council meeting.
I don't think she's here.
So through you, Madam Chair, the clerk's office will not predict the outcome of a vote, so I can't predict what the next vote will be. But if a vote does lose and there is nothing left, these are only recommendations of Planning and Development Committee.
But, Mr.
And when
Clerk.
it goes to council, a member could move another motion if they see fit.
Well, we're going to have 10 people at council when this comes to council. Explain to me why when a motion to approve the conversion fails. So if approval fails, why is default not to approve?
Through you, Madam Chair, it would still take some member to introduce a motion. So
Okay.
the fact that Councillor Paleshi, his motion was very specific to delete and replace recommendation 2, that lost. No member of committee moved staff recommendation 2 until now. So it would sit in limbo until a member moves it.
Okay, Councillor
Reports
Gibson.
presented to committee are not on presentation deemed to be moved. It still takes a member to introduce the motion.
It'd be like the Crosby trial.
Okay. Councillor Gibson? Like a what?
That's a good one, Councillor Spovieri. I was just going to agree with the clerk because, Madam Chair, when you called the vote, and I voted for the staff report, Councillor Paleshi had already pulled out number 2. So all we were voting on before was the other application. That's what my interpretation. Otherwise, I never would have voted to staff report until we got by this. I think normally we would have taken Councillor Paleshi's first and then do it the second way, but that's not what happened. So
Okay.
I have to agree with the clerk. We've got
Well,
no
a
decision.
recorded vote has been called on number 2.
Recorded vote on staff recommendation 2 as shown on the screen. All in favor, please stand to be counted. Showing in favor is Councillor Fortini, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Medeiros, Chair Moore, Councillor Dillon. All opposed to the motion, please stand to be counted. Showing opposed is Councillor Miles, Councillor Sprovieri, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Willens, and Councillor Gibson. Madam Chair, that motion loses on a tie 5-5.
It'll go without a recommendation to council on Wednesday.
We have to move it again.
Council, yes.
If nobody moves it, does it tell you what happens then? Just stays in limbo? If nobody moves it, just hypothetically.
And so just so that we don't have a conversation that not everybody's a part of, the question is okay, go ahead, Councillor Dillon.
Sorry, I just wanted to just clarify situation if, for example, if nobody does move it, what's the status of the motion? And secondly, what if it's a tie again? What happens?
Then it's not decided upon until council makes a decision.
That's correct.
Remains in abeyance.
Gotcha.
Okay, Councillor Gibson?
I was just going to clarify, from my point of view, we did not make a decision on that application. So now it's up to the applicant.
To the who?
The applicant has choices. I don't know if staff agree with that, but we didn't make a decision here one way or the other. Now I would think it's in their hand.
Okay, well, on a positive note, we did pass 5 out of 6 of them today. We'll move now down to other business, the Volvo application. Is that going to be handed out for members of council? Councillor Gibson added it to the agenda. It was circulated to us. It was handed out? Okay, I didn't get a copy of it. Thank you. Councillor Gibson has added this. This was deferred from a previous meeting. We met with staff to discuss this further and better understand it. Would someone like to move the recommendations in the report? Councillor Medeiros, it's in your area. All those in favor? That's carried. The next item that was added to the agenda was in everybody's calendar for August the 9th. There is a tentative council meeting scheduled. There's a recommendation that has been handed to me by the clerk, and if somebody would be prepared to move it, that the tentatively scheduled August 9th, 2017 City Council meeting be confirmed for the purpose of considering planning recommendation reports as well as other urgent corporate business for the municipality as determined by council. The CAO, commissioners and department heads in accordance with the procedure bylaw 160-2004 as amended. The reason why planning, you moved to Councillor Bowman, thank you. You know, and I know that, you know, we would all prefer to not have to come in, but with our new planning commissioner in place, we do have 3 reports that staff are able to get to the July meeting, but we now have 12 reports that should be appropriately tracked to the August 9th meeting, so that, you know, a lot of files are being brought to a conclusion, which is really good news. So it's been moved by Councillor Bowman. Councillor Gibson, you have a question on this?
No question. Over a year ago, I had already booked something for this date, so I won't be able to be there, so I will go ahead and have it, but this one, there might be others, and you better make sure you have quorum, but I booked something, so put me down as absent on personal, please.
Okay. Councillor Miles?
I'm not sure that I will be in attendance. I do have something booked for that time, so.
Before.
Well, I know I can be, Councillor Medeiros.
Yeah, similar. I have a booked trip that 8 months ago that I already booked, so I will be out of the country.
Okie dokie. And Councillor Frattini?
Like a week before, a week after?
The only, this is a tentatively scheduled meeting that is in our calendars. If this is not an option because quorum cannot be achieved, the only alternative we have is for the mayor to call a special council meeting. So if the week before or the week after works for most people, then maybe that's what we need to do. But with 12 reports for planning, you know, we've had some of these files that have been, you know, hanging around for a while. Mr.
Chair, if I would
CAO.
suggest, I mean, we've looked at these reports. We need to keep the business moving, and the week before doesn't work because, you know, they won't be ready, and the week after is AMO, and you're all at AMO. So
Okay.
really, hopefully we get quorum on the 9th. We've got to move these files forward.
Okay. It has been moved. I think we can probably get 6 folks, 6 of us there, if we have to. Councillor Dillon is a maybe. We'll put him on a maybe to the positive side. How's that? Okay, all those in favor of the recommendation? We need 6 votes for that. We got it. Thank you. And then maybe, Mr. Clerk, if you could survey sort of sooner rather than later, because, okay, 10.2, Councillor Paleshi, are you, that was the motion on the MCR?
Oh, thank you. I would just like to pull the original motion that was referred to staff. I understand, you know, staff has provided with a response, provided council with a response. It does say in the response that has not been suggested by staff that Heritage Height would have to compensate for employment land lost due to the conversions, but I would like to officially put the motion back on the floor and have it voted on. I'm not going to speak to it. I'm just.
Can you tell us what page you're looking on? Just in 713.
713-58.
58.
Appendix F. It's also somewhere else. It's also. Where else was it? There are minutes in here too, weren't there, Peter, that had the motion? Oh, there it is. On the board.
So you're putting forward the motion?
I'm putting forward that motion that was referred that staff provided us with a response, I'm putting the motion back on the floor to actually be voted on.
Okay. Councillor Dillon.
So, I just want to just clarify a couple of things. So essentially what this motion is saying that there will be no new employment lands added to Heritage Heights.
Through you, Madam Chairman, that's correct. Our target for planning employment lands in Heritage Heights is 300 hectares, and that's what we are going to move forward with.
Is that based, what activity rate is that based upon?
I'm sorry?
What's that based upon? What number in terms of activity rate?
That's in order to achieve an overall activity rate at a citywide level of approximately 37% by 2041.
We voted to get it to 40%. What's our inventory of land that's available to get to 40%? Are we limiting ourselves? And one question to add to that is, so from what I understand, Heritage Heights, the secondary plan is not complete. How does that impact our planning that goes ahead in terms of our wiggle room to add more employment land if need be?
Through you, Madam Chairman, as you read the response from staff in Appendix F, in order for us to hit the 40% activity rate, we would have to add approximately 525 net hectares in Heritage Heights to achieve that rate. It's our feeling at this point in time that even though we could designate that land, additional land in Heritage Heights, it likely wouldn't be developed because of the locational issues that are associated with its geography. So we feel that 300 net hectares is an appropriate number to plan for with regards to Heritage Heights, and also represents the settlement that was achieved through ROPA 24 at the OMB regarding the population and employment targets that were set out.
So we are essentially staff, do you agree, are you okay with going ahead with this, or do you think that it's beneficial that we wait till the secondary plan is complete, that we have enough information going forward? It's probably be a little while before that's completed.
Through you,
or are you good with capping it at 300 right now?
Through you, Madam Chairman, this 300 hectares essentially represents the settlement that we achieved on ROPA 24. To put it quite bluntly, you can't plan for something that may never happen in terms of additional employment lands given its location. So we feel 300 hectares is an appropriate number. With regards to get to the 37%, that doesn't preclude us from achieving a 40% activity rate if we are to increase densities citywide on the employment side to make up any decrease in the land supply that's not available.
So if we increase densities, we can reach 40% if we leave this at 300%.
Correct.
So how would we go about doing that? Like, do you have, so what you're telling us is that it's possible. How are we going to reach 40% then? Where are we going to increase the density, and how will we do it?
Through you, Madam Chairman, I think the first step is to undertake that economic development master plan, which will identify strategies on the economic development side to achieve a higher employment density across the city.
And you're sure that we can add that 3% through there? Are you confident in that?
I'm optimistic that we can implement strategies that help us get closer to 40%.
So every time we talk about Brampton, we say all roads lead to Brampton, strategically located near Toronto, near the largest business hub in downtown Toronto, second largest. They're going to be building another Union Station there. We're, I think I mentioned 400 series highways. We have everything going for us. But it seems weird when I say weird or odd, that whenever we talk about employment lands, nobody wants to build there. And going back to the 44 acres, I used to say it's prime land. It's near 427. It's on the major, corridor as Highway 50 on Queen Street. Nobody wants to go there. That's what I always hear. But then why are we always selling ourselves as a place to be? I'm sure if you look right across Highway 50, speaking about the 44 acres, all they're doing is building employment there. They're building employment everywhere around Brampton. Everywhere I drive, I'm like, this is a good employment place, or this is a good employment place. I wonder why they're building it there, but we keep saying, come here, but then we keep telling council, nobody wants to come. So I'm a little bit confused. So if we can ensure that we'll be getting to 40%, that we have a plan in place through the Economic Development Master Plan, I can say, listen, let's cap it at 40%. But to me, common sense and logic would say, we don't know, we're not 100% sure, but let's not make a mistake of acting too quickly by limiting our options in Heritage Heights. We might need 350, we might need 400 acres for all we know. When the planning is done and complete, or when the planning process is taking place, we need to really take a look at it at that point, rather than limit ourselves right now. So I'm not sure why we want to cap it, or why or Councillor Paleski, who's moved the motion, is so intent on capping it. For me, I think, and I'm sure other people around here would say, listen, let's keep our options open. So do you think it's beneficial that we keep our options open? Because we're not finalizing anything right now in terms of the whole secondary plan. Just in terms of options, would you agree?
Through you, Madam Chairman, I think this number relates to the to the settlement that was achieved at the OMB regarding the planning targets for Heritage Heights. So I'm comfortable at this point in time in the 300 hectares being maintained as the planning target for employment land.
So what if we don't meet 40% in the other areas that you say potentially could be intensified to add jobs? Like, what's our plan B then? Where do we build?
Through you, Madam Chairman, I'm confident that through the efforts of our Economic Development Office that we'll be able to achieve a 40% or close to it activity rate.
So can you, or staff today, if you want to do, I wouldn't say put it in writing, guarantee that we can at least get close to it, that the Economic Development Plan will at least allow us to give us options to intensify the other areas of potential employment? Whereas we don't need to plan for more or keep more options in Heritage Heights?
If I may, through you, Madam Chair, certainly the strategy would be put in place citywide to look at our options around economic development strategies. The nature of employment is changing. We need to understand that, how live work units, all these other changing working from home opportunities present themselves. I certainly wouldn't guarantee that we're achieving anything other than a strategy that has some logic and some sense behind that. But I would be confident that we can look at a strategy that's well thought out and put forward to council for their consideration.
And I'm not meaning to belabor the point. And we'll put a strategy forward. But what I'm saying, what if we can't? Isn't it in common sense and logic? For me, says let's keep our options open. Wouldn't that make sense? Why would we want to cap ourselves off even before any planning's done? Because, mind you, this is the last bastion of hope. This is our last area of development. We've basically developed every other area. Why do we want to limit ourselves right now?
So the 300 target, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Waters, that was a negotiated settlement through the process, and that actually achieves a fairly robust activity rate in the Heritage Heights settlement area. So I think our work ahead of us would be to actually find that balance of mixed use throughout the rest of the community that would bring employment across the whole city and not cluster it in one sector.
Doesn't make sense to me at all. I don't think you answered the question even. But I'll leave my words at that. I've been extreme. I don't mean to be rude. I apologize. But I don't think we're talking about the future of our city right now. And you bring a motion on right now, just, not randomly, but we have to make sure we prepare. Every day all I hear is from our parents. Our kids are going out to university somewhere else. Thank God we're getting a university. All they say is our kids are going to get jobs in Mississauga. They're going to go to Toronto. They're going to Waterloo. And for the love of God, why aren't we keeping our options open? Is all I'm trying to say. Why are we capping ourselves or capping the number of jobs even before we have a chance to plan the whole area? Which is all I'm saying, right? We gotta. Yes. Yes.
At the risk of being accused of cutting you
I'm
off,
not accusing
I
you.
know that you feel very passionate about this.
I am very passionate about jobs and the future of
and
our children. Yes, I am.
We all are.
I am. Well,
Thank
I don't know why you guys keep converting lands then if you are.
just tried to convert retail to employment, which you didn't support it.
Retail
Okay,
to
we're
employment?
not, absolutely.
Well, 1,500 acres of land in 26 years. That's what Brampton has done. We're not keeping pace with the rest of the municipalities around us, and I think people are eager for me to stop talking about this. So I'll listen to the other comments.
Councillor Frattini.
Thank you, through the chair. I won't be as long. This motion, will it affect anything of the MCR report that we just passed? Because there was an appeal done through the Heritage Heights?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, it won't.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could we please have a Planning 101 workshop so we can all understand where we're going in the future and maybe map out the employment areas, why certain areas are good for employment, why you can't or can or cannot put so much employment in one area. It's not as simple as just saying, here's where I want to have more employment. And that's what I think we need to all understand. And it takes a long time to understand this. Being a planner, you guys all know, you got to go to school for all that kind of stuff. We don't. We as council members can pretend to be planners, but we don't know what you guys know. So I think it'll be very helpful for all of us, including myself, and I've been in council 26 years, to understand even more about why employment lands go where they go. And David, you've given a brief on why the Heritage Heights area is basically at the max that staff feel it will be, and that was good. But why? So let's look at that and say why. And I think it would help Councillor Dillon, and it would help all of us to understand why. And I agree with you, David, that there's other areas that we can be a lot more intense, and that's what we got to start talking about more about. So that's what I would suggest. And if I need to put in a motion, I'll put it in a motion. But I would hope that if we do this, that all members of council will please attend, so we can stop talking about it and start putting some action into it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Miles.
Call the question, please.
Okay, Councillor Miles has called the question. All those in favor of calling the question? I understand. All those in favor of calling the question? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The two people on the board who have not yet spoken to this do have the right to speak. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. David, what if everything is left as it is in Heritage Heights, for that Heritage Heights area, just their area, what is that ratio?
Through you, Madam Chairman, I believe Commissioner Elliott did express a response to that. Essentially, it's a 2-to-1 ratio.
So employment high, it's by setting this 300 hectares aside, they will have a higher employment ratio than a lot of other areas in Brampton?
That's correct. It would be higher than the current 32% activity rate, which is across the city.
Okay. And we do have plans for much greater intensification of the Queen Street corridor, for instance, than was previously planned, which is, I believe, what you were talking about when you mentioned increased intensity in employment areas equaling the same 40%.
That's correct. And looking at some other areas, some mobility hubs and some other areas of interest right now, and looking at the changing nature of employment, there's opportunities to look at the density of these employment lands that exist outside of Heritage Heights.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Medeiros.
Through the chair, and I guess just piggybacking on what Councillor Bowman suggested, it just speaks to, in my mind, why the hurry and the motion. With all due respect, Councillor Palesh, I do understand, the intention, but with all, I guess, other plans still underway, and the question comes to my mind: why would we limit it in that area, and then after not other areas of the city? But I think what Councillor Bowman just suggested as well tells me, why not defer this and let's get a little bit more information on the other plans, and then after that would help provide more insight into this type of decision. But to be quite frank, to make this type of decision and limit it, go against a staff report based on what?
What are you going against?
So I would tend to think that I'm not sure if a decision right now is required, but I think I will support what was intended. It's just I would hate to limit what Councillor Dillon talks about, the options and what we go forth to ensure we meet that number. I don't think that a decision is required on this right now and to limit our strategic opportunity to boost employment. Thank you.
Councillor Willens, you were not on the board when we voted to call the question. But you can, we'll let you speak.
Thank you.
We're in a
Just
good mood
quickly,
today, and the clerk said you
David, you
could.
said that I'm pretty sure I heard you say you're okay with the 300 hectares in the Sheriff's.
Through you, Madam Chairman, I think my words were it's an appropriate target for this part of the city, given its locational characteristics and its potential sort of lack of transportation infrastructure at this point in time.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of the recommendation put forward by Councillor Pelleshi? Recorded vote has been called. Mr. Clerk?
Recorded vote's been requested on the motion.
Can we have a electronic vote?
You want an electronic? Okay.
Okay. Members of committee, voting is now open. All members have voted. And the motion carries 6-4.
Okay. Members of committee, there are 3 items of correspondence. Actually 4, with the 13.4 that was added out from TAC Holborn. Someone would like to move receipt of all items of correspondence. Councillor Willens, all in favor? That's carried. Are there any questions from members of council? I don't have the... Oh, I can see it on this one. Okay. Councillor Frattini.
Thank you, through the chair. Just one question, I think Councillor Gibson brought it up. On the building there from Martin Way, that conversion, it never came to council, does it? I don't remember it coming for the conversion.
Sorry, if I understand the situation correctly, and forgive me, it happened before I joined the city, but I understand that the zoning was a dual-purpose zoning and allowed for the conversion without that coming back to city staff for comment or approval.
That's correct.
So staff could have made that recommendation without us, what do you say?
It was, sorry, through you, Chair, it was not actually a result of a staff recommendation. Staff weren't able to comment on it because there was no application for staff to comment on. The zoning in place allowed for the dual use of commercial and residential. So the region proposed that the 2 floors of commercial use be converted. That did not come back to city staff for comment as the zoning allowed that as a dual use.
But when the application was put in, there was 2 floors was supposed to be converted for jobs, and the rest was supposed to be for residential. So converting 1 floor or 2 floors, where they need nothing, had nothing to do with the city, so they could just, the region could do it automatically because of the zoning?
Well, as I understand it, because the zoning in place allows for that dual use, that's correct, that could be converted without coming through a zoning bylaw amendment.
So if it was a private person, not the region, he could have done the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you. Just in regards to the referral for recommendation number 2 for 7.13. I got a question in terms of the work that's being done, but if councillors are making decisions to refer it, I think it's irresponsible to make a decision, such a big decision, without actually knowing that information. And I think they need to do some homework. The question because it wastes council's time and wastes staff's time. The question I have is how much work are you actually going to be required to do in terms of getting that information, which I assume you already have, and that we already have?
So members of committee, that vote on staff recommendation 2 lost on 3 different votes for 3 different actions on that, so that's not debatable unless the committee wants to reopen its decision.
I wanted to let you know you need to do your homework. If it did, is what I meant.
Again, Councillor Dillon, that's a hypothetical question, and not one I think that staff should be asked to answer. Councillor Gibson?
I just want to clarify the question that Councillor Fortini asked, so maybe it doesn't happen again. And this is not to speak down to staff, but when council made its decision on the Hanson Road property, it was under the basis, at least my version was, under the basis that 2 of those floors would be employment floors, and the rest is residential. And when we were at the region, we were told by regional staff that they wanted to, and the report was to convert the second story into residential. And we were told that the City of Brampton staff are okay. In fact, I think they had a letter from the City of Brampton staff saying they were okay with that. So regardless of what the zoning was or turned into or even is right now, when we put our hands in the air, we put our hands in the air for a concept, and that concept was to, and I know at the time when we did it, staff recommendation was to have 2 floors here of employment, of commercial property. And then I kind of felt like I got blindsided, not by the city staff, I got blindsided a bit by the regional staff in the fact that we didn't really have a lot of discussion on it. At least it wasn't my area, it was south of Queen, so I didn't know too much what was going on. But it made it very difficult for us at that time, knowing that we had voted one way back a few months back, and then a developer comes in and wants to flip his decision because he can't rent something. And that's kind of the history, Councillor Fortini, what happened on that one. So although there might have been dual zoning at the beginning, I would think, well, once we made our decision on that property and made it not residential on the second floor, that would have overseen the what was there before. So that's just my humble opinion.
Mr. Fortini.
Well, going back, thank you. And that's why I was trying to get at. We made a decision. I remember they wanted to rent, ship the whole second floor for job. So coming here, like if it was a private person, he comes and puts an application for this, he's allowed just to not bother coming to council and just put what he wants in. And, we approved that, and that's what we expect to get. Meanwhile, he did not do that. He ended up changing the zoning without us knowing. So that's what I'm trying to get at. So as far as I know, if the zoning allows it, am I correct? Then they're allowed to do it.
I think if I can, the language or the lesson learned in that was that we need to have stronger language in the recommendations, and whatever paperwork that follows the decision that doesn't allow them to convert. We specifically, as Councillor Gibson said, we specifically requested and approved 2 floors of commercial with the residential on top. But the property itself had mixed-use zoning on it. We needed stronger language in the documents and the approval that did not allow them to come in without going through a rezoning application for that second floor of commercial. So I don't think anybody anticipated at the time that that's what they would be doing, but it ended up that that's what they did do, and some of us felt very strongly that that should not happen for the Queen Street corridor, if that helps you. Well, we had no say because we didn't have enough strong enough language in the agreement. Okay. Are there any questions from, I know you're anxious to get out of here, but we do have a public question period. Are there any questions from members of the public in attendance today on a matter that we dealt with during the, no? Everybody's shaking their head. No, that's good. Adjournment. Moved by Councillor Willens, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
I didn't want to leave.
For the what?
I